Chapter 3079 3079 Fading Away, Regardless of Success or Failure. Chapter 3079 3079 Fading Away, Regardless of Success or Failure. 3079 Fading Away, Regardless of Success or Failure. The celestial realm was destroyed, and the Genesis world was annihilated. Everything was engulfed by hysteria, and all that remained was a boundless expanse of nothingness. 7th-tier elites were undying, so were they all going to wander in this vast and empty void forever? Ha ha! Ha ha! Hysteria roared with laughter. It had waited for this day for far too long. From its past life to its present life, and after experiencing the destruction of 2 Genesis worlds, it had finally succeeded. Extermination flew over and said, "Why are you laughing like an idiot? I've already put up with you for too long." Hysteria howled as it lashed out at Extermination. Right now, it had already become the Genesis world. The longer that passed, the more powerful it would become. Before succeeding, it had still needed to rely on Extermination to hold Linghan back. Now that it had succeeded, however, was there still any need for Extermination? Hysteria didn't need to share this success with anyone. Pun! Extermination naturally wouldn't stand there and allow Hysteria to attack her as it pleased. She moved to block its attack, yet she was immediately sent flying. She stabilized herself after flying 50,000 kilometers into the distance. There was a cold smile on her face, and she was surprisingly calm as she said, "I initially thought that you would remain composed for a while longer. At the very least, I didn't expect you to turn on your ally so quickly." Since things had already come to this, Linghan was no longer in a hurry like before. The Genesis world had already been engulfed by Hysteria, so Hysteria was now the new Genesis world. If one entered Hysteria's body, they would then be subject to Hysteria's rules. Linghan wanted to see what Extermination's true purpose was. After doing so many unreasonable things to help Hysteria, just what was she truly after? Hysteria was also slightly puzzled. Even though its body was colossal, it had indeed been a person at the very start. It was just that this person had entered their current body using their divine sense. Afterward, they had then transformed themselves into a dimension. In any case, there was nothing wrong with Hysteria's intelligence, so it naturally realized something was off about Extermination's attitude right now. Firstly, why had Extermination helped it? Hysteria didn't care much about this, and it only cared about the outcome. Secondly, why was Extermination completely unsurprised by its betrayal? Just what was she playing at? This was clearly its previous self, yet Hysteria couldn't help but feel extremely distant and unfamiliar with her. It felt like she was a complete stranger. "So what if I've turned on you? Can you do anything about it?" Hysteria replied using its divine sense as it brandished its countless tentacles. "Everything is within my grasp," Extermination replied calmly. She appeared as composed as could be. "Is she acting?" Hysteria was extremely puzzled. She was at the 7th tier, so would she be a fool? So be it if Extermination had allied with it because it had tricked her. However, this wasn't the case. Instead, it was Extermination who had actively chosen to ally with it. She was definitely no fool. The problem was, it possessed the power of the entire Genesis world right now, so who could rival it? Humph! Regardless of what your plans are, they're all futile in the face of absolute power, Hysteria declared as it swung a tentacle at Extermination. Only a short moment had passed, yet its power had already increased threefold. "Origin-destroying strike!" Extermination cried as she made a tapping motion with her finger. Her movements were ethereal and beautiful. 1. A ray of light shot into Hysteria's body, yet Extermination was also sent flying by Hysteria's strike. If she had been an ordinary 7th-tier elite, she would have potentially been killed by this strike. "Ha! Is this your trump card?" Hysteria laughed. "Before my absolute strength, your struggles are all in vain!" Whoosh! It swung another tentacle at Extermination. Extermination dodged, not facing this attack head-on. When the Genesis world of the last era was destroyed, countless souls and wills fused together. Within this, there was even the will of the Genesis world itself, Extermination said. It was as if she were giving Hysteria a lesson. However, Ling Han, Lin Luo, Chong Yen, and the others were all listening carefully. It was very likely that Extermination was about to reveal a huge secret. The Genesis world also has a will of its own, even though this will is extremely subtle and weak. The only information contained in this will is information regarding how the Genesis world has nurtured life. Extermination explained. Of course, with life also comes death. As for me, I'm someone who managed to obtain this information, Extermination said as she pointed at herself. A breathtakingly beautiful smile spread across her face. However, it's a shame that the Genesis world of the last era was destroyed, leading to most of this information being lost as well. I was only able to grasp a small portion of it. She looked at Hysteria and continued. Coincidentally, the information I received was the secret codes of death. Hysteria's expression changed drastically. This expression was also reflected on its colossal body, in the sense that the color of its skin started to change rapidly and chaotically. Someone as powerful as Extermination definitely wouldn't bluff. In addition, Extermination continued. You truly shouldn't have transformed yourself into a dimension. You learn from the mistake of your past life, and you realize that even the destructive power of the exploding Genesis world wouldn't be able to kill you if you transformed into a dimension. However, the existence of the Genesis world naturally follows its own set of regulations. There are secret codes of life, and there are also secret codes of death. What these secret codes target are dimensions. Hysteria's tentacles started to sway again, signifying its fluctuating emotions. Extermination looked at Ling Han and said, I already told you before a new age is about to arrive. Why don't you believe me? Ling Han's expression was cold. Extermination had seemingly tricked everyone with her schemes. She had used Wang Qianhe to target Ling Han, and she had also set a trap for Hysteria long ago. Who exactly are you? He asked. Me? Extermination said with a faint smile. There's no hurry. It's not time to reveal the secret yet. She looked at Hysteria and continued. This is the final dimension of the Genesis world. Once it's destroyed, the door to a new world will open, allowing us to walk out of this small pond. Chong Yen and the others were all filled with excitement. It was because of this that they had chosen to ally with Extermination. Moreover, they would also obtain huge benefits when Hysteria died, and it was even possible that they could advance to the 8th tier. Absolute nonsense! Hysteria bellowed. Its divine sense boomed into the surroundings, causing tumultuous waves to crash through the minds of the 7th-tier elites. It brandished its tentacles and attacked Extermination, roaring, I'll kill you first. Extermination immediately dodged its attacks. Even though she was nowhere near as powerful as Ling Han, she was also a powerful 7th-tier elite just like Hysteria. Thus, she could dodge at least 90% of Hysteria's attacks. Even when she was occasionally struck, she was more than powerful enough to withstand the attacks. Hysteria, since you've transformed into a dimension, you have no option but to abide by the rules that dictate dimensions. This won't change even though you've already engulfed all of the other dimensions. And when we look at the life cycle of dimensions, it's only reasonable that they eventually face destruction. Hysteria continued to ferociously attack her, yet before long, its body quickly started to become unstable. Rays of light started to bounce around inside its body, and it was as if they all yearned to shoot out. Perhaps Extermination's words were true? Perhaps Hysteria was genuinely about to be destroyed. This was truly inconceivable. After engulfing the entire Genesis world, Hysteria should have been charging toward the peak of its life. Yet, it was at this exact moment that it passed its zenith and started to plummet. 1, 2, 3, 4. Extermination continued to count, and when she reached 59, Hysteria finally lost its power to attack. Countless rays of light crashed around inside it, causing its colossal golden body to shudder violently. No, I'm the most powerful and mighty being in this world. I've engulfed the entire Genesis world, So I'm now going to leap out of this expanse of heaven and earth. Hysteria roared. Its divine sense fluctuated through the void. Lin Luo and the others naturally saw everything. They were filled with astonishment. Was extermination going to turn around and prove her innocence now? Hysteria's aura became increasingly unstable. At the same time, its body also started to expand. It was like a balloon that had been filled with too much air, about to explode at any moment. Chapter 3080 Continually Changing Situation. Chapter 3080 Continually Changing Situation. 3080 Continually Changing Situation. Everyone was deeply astonished, including Ling Han. This turn of events was truly unexpected. Hysteria had just reached the peak of its life, yet it had quickly fallen to rock bottom in the very next instant. Was it done for? Was it about to die? Extermination, just who in the world are you? Hysteria roared using its divine sense. It discovered the perilous situation of its body, and it realized that it might explode at any moment. It was using its full strength to stabilize its body, yet it was as if that destructive power were the ultimate will of heaven and earth. This was a will that didn't heed his command. Extermination clasped her hands behind her back, and explained calmly. With life comes inevitable death. Separation begets union, and union begets separation. Do you know? Every world and every dimension has an upper limit regarding how much power it can contain. After engulfing so many realms, the power that you've absorbed has already surpassed this limit. So, even if I hadn't targeted you, you would have still struggled to escape this fate of destruction. I simply accelerated the process. Hysteria was boiling with rage. If extermination hadn't used that so-called origin-destroying strike, would it have been forced into this perilous state? If it were given enough time, it could have torn open the void using its absolute strength, and jumped out of this small and restrictive pond. Of course, Hysteria naturally didn't know what lay beyond the void. Was it a more spectacular world, or was it an ice-cold and desolate land of nothingness? Regardless, as long as it left this world, it would no longer have to suffer the restriction of this heaven and earth. Now, however, was everything going to be destroyed by its past self? Why? Everyone, are you not going to hurry up and attack? We can't allow it to unleash a dying attack and cause immense damage, Extermination said as she looked at Ling Han and the others. To be more precise, she was specifically talking to Ling Han. After all, no one else could cause any damage to Hysteria, even though it was already in such dire straits. Not only that, but a casual counterattack from Hysteria could easily kill even 7th-tier elites. The death of Extermination and Yellow Sand in the last era was proof of this fact. The might of the Genesis world was unstoppable, and the invincibility of 7th-tier elites was not absolute. Thus, only Ling Han was powerful enough to attack it. Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. Everything was progressing according to Extermination's plans. Not long ago, she had obstructed Ling Han and given Hysteria the opportunity to engulf all of the dimensions. Now, however, she was screwing Hysteria over and pushing it to the brink of destruction. Just what was she playing at? Ling Han felt an instinctive urge to refuse her proposal. However, Hysteria had already become their greatest threat, so it was necessary that they eliminate it as soon as possible. If it were killed now, they still had an opportunity to rebuild the Genesis world. However, Extermination was definitely scheming something else. She definitely wasn't trying to help them. If she had truly been acting in the best interests of the Genesis world, then she would have allied with Ling Han a long time ago. With Ling Han's power at that time, they could have easily suppressed Hysteria and stopped it from advancing. Once Ling Han advanced to the 7th tier, they could have then killed Hysteria with relative ease. Yet, things had come to this instead. That being the case, Extermination's aim was definitely more than just killing Hysteria. In any case, she had repeatedly mentioned a new age in jumping out of this small pond. Thus, killing Hysteria was most likely only a single aspect of her plans. The problem was, what if Extermination knew that Ling Han would think like this? Thus, she was doing the opposite of what she meant, and her true intention was actually for Ling Han not to attack. Ling Han felt slightly hesitant. There was an information asymmetry between them, so he could only rely on guessing. He looked at Extermination, and Extermination simply smiled faintly at him. She was stunningly beautiful, and it was as if everything was within her grasp. Ling Han immediately made up his mind. Whoosh! He charged forward and unleashed a furious punch at Hysteria. The reason for this was simple. If Extermination didn't block his attack, then that would mean that she truly wanted him to attack Hysteria. If that were the case, then he would retract his attack straight away. If the inverse were true, however, and Extermination stepped forward to block him, then it would prove that she was uttering a load of trash. His attack was as quick as lightning. Extermination didn't stop him, yet Ling Han didn't retract his attack either. Just as Ling Han's fist was about to strike Hysteria. Whoosh! Extermination finally made her move. She immediately dashed beside Hysteria and unleashed a palm strike at Ling Han. The three of them were almost standing in a straight line, with Hysteria in the middle. Moreover, Extermination was closer to Hysteria, so even though she had launched her attack later, it was her attack that landed first. Pun! Extermination was immediately sent flying by the shock wave, with her face as white as a sheet. Even as strong as Extermination was, she still couldn't withstand the power of Ling Han's devastating attack. She would definitely be at a disadvantage if she faced his attacks head-on. Surprisingly, however, Ling Han didn't attack her or Hysteria again. There was surprise in Extermination's beautiful eyes as she stood in the distance. "You're very good at acting. You purposely stepped forward just then, and you acted as if you wanted to stop me at all costs," Ling Han said calmly. "However, since you've set up such a scenario, you naturally would have considered the fact that I would guess your intentions and use this method to probe you. So, I speculated that you've set up a scheme within a scheme. This current scenario is still a facade, something you're using to cover up your true intentions." Extermination's expression finally changed. Wah! She vomited a mouthful of blood, which immediately combusted upon hitting the ground, turning into a pile of ashes. She stared at Ling Han for a long time, eventually saying, "Who would have thought that you could make such a calm judgment in such a short amount of time and in the face of such a complicated situation?" Ling Han shook his head and said, "I was simply taking a gamble." Extermination suddenly roared with laughter and said, "Very well! Then you've gambled correctly. However, after planning and preparing for so many years, is this something that you can interfere with?" She recited some chant, and her beautiful face instantly became even paler. She spat out another mouthful of blood, and this again combusted into ashes just like before. She then pointed at Hysteria from a distance. Whoosh! A burst of black air rushed at Hysteria. This was definitely nothing good. Ling Han humphed coldly and swung a fist at the burst of black air. Meanwhile, Lin Luo and the others all wore strange expressions. The situation was changing far too quickly. In the beginning, it had been them struggling and trying to attack Hysteria, while Extermination was the one doing everything she could to stop them. Now, however, the situation was the complete opposite. It was Extermination who was trying to attack Hysteria, and it was Ling Han who was trying to stop her and protect Hysteria. This situation was far too strange. Ling Han's punch slammed into the burst of black air. However, his fist eerily passed through the black air, and it was as if the black air didn't exist at all. Whoosh! The black air entered Hysteria's body and didn't exit again. Ling Han turned around to observe the situation with a frown. What was this black air? It was ineffective against him, yet it was incredibly destructive toward Hysteria. Hysteria's aura became increasingly unstable after being infiltrated by the black air, and it was as if it were about to explode at any moment. "This is another secret code of death that I obtained from the Genesis World's will of the last era," Extermination explained calmly. However, unleashing this attack had placed a huge burden on her, and she immediately spat out another mouthful of blood. Her aura also plummeted drastically. "This attack is only effective against dimensions, so it's impossible for you to stop it," Ling Han chuckled coldly, saying, "With your current situation, how many more times can you unleash such an attack?" He charged at Extermination, not giving her another opportunity to attack. Extermination dodged, not willing to face Ling Han head-on. Instead, she found opportunities to continually attack Hysteria. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. She attacked Hysteria again and again. Even though the burden on her was so immense that she wanted to vomit her internal organs, she still persisted and continued to attack. She attacked relentlessly, and Hysteria was finally unable to withstand this pressure any longer. Its colossal body undulated like water, and all of a sudden, a column of blindingly bright light erupted from its body. Chapter 3081 Self-Destruction of Hysteria. Chapter 3081 Self-Destruction of Hysteria. 3081 Self-Destruction of Hysteria. Hysteria was self-destructing. A column of blindingly brilliant light soared into the air, forcing even Ling Han to shut his eyes lest he be blinded. In the next instant, however, he immediately started to move. He flew toward Lin Luo and the others, directly grabbing them and putting them under his protection. Boom! Behind him, a devastating shock wave roared over, much like a tsunami wave crashing toward a shore. He was directly sent flying. Ling Han defended with his full strength, with his powers of dimension from tens of millions of dimensions intertwining into a web that blocked the petrifying shock wave behind him. Hysteria's self-destruction had ignited a catastrophic explosion. The entire Genesis world had been engulfed by Hysteria, so upon self-destructing, this was equivalent to the entire Genesis world being ignited at once. Moreover, this was a Genesis world that had been compressed into a single dimension. Thus, the scale of the explosion was naturally even more devastating. It was clear that Ling Han couldn't withstand such a powerful explosion. Instead, he could only go with the flow and choose to be sent flying by the overwhelming shock waves of the explosion. If he dared to resist, he would be severely wounded even if he weren't killed. At the same time, the majority of people in the dimensions inside him would also be killed. Rumble. All that remained in the void was a series of deafening explosions and rumbles. As the explosive shock waves ripped through the void, even the void storms were comprehensively reduced to nothingness. This was no longer a matter of how far Ling Han was sent flying. Instead, it was a matter of how long Ling Han was carried by this explosive shock wave from Hysteria's self-destruction. A whopping 100 million years. Who could have imagined this? The humongous explosion caused by Hysteria's self-destruction had lasted an insane 100 million years. Only after all these years did the energy windstorm finally start to subside. Ling Han stood still and unclenched his hands, releasing Lin Luo and the others. "We need to go back," Ling Han said. With a stomp of his foot, a giant pair of wings unfurled behind him. It was created by a combination of fundamental power and powers of dimension. With a flap of his wings, his speed immediately reached an incredible level, rapidly bringing him back to the location where Hysteria had self-destructed. Lin Luo and the others quickly followed after him. Perhaps there could exist huge gulfs between the battle prowess of different 7th-tier elites. However, their speed was something that wouldn't differ by much. Ling Han was indeed slightly quicker than them, but only by a small margin. Another 100 million years passed, and Ling Han and the others finally arrived back at their original location. Following Hysteria's self-destruction, even the energy windstorms in the void were reduced to nothingness. However, the void was far too large, so it was most likely only a matter of time before the storms of energy from other locations slowly permeated this area again. At that time, everything would return to normal. Many years into the future, perhaps a new Genesis world would be born again. Death was the conclusion of life, yet death itself was not an absolute conclusion. Instead, it represented a new beginning. Where Hysteria had stood before, there was surprisingly a fuzzy door. Looking at this door, it was as if they could vaguely see the world that lay behind it. In terms of what actually existed in this world, however, they were at a complete loss. Was this the so-called door that would lead them out of this small pond? Above this door, There also hovered a golden orb that was spinning and occasionally releasing a beam of light that illuminated the void. Whoosh! Extermination, Chong Yen, and the others also flew over. Excitement and anticipation appeared on their faces when they saw the fuzzy door and the golden orb above it. Were these the things that they were after? Whoosh! Another figure flew over from some other direction. Ling Han turned around, and he couldn't help but feel astonished. This wasn't a person, but instead a golden octopus. It was approximately 9 meters long, and its 8 tentacles swayed under its body. Hysteria? This was indeed Hysteria, even though his body was countless times smaller than before. It actually hadn't died? Extermination! The octopus bellowed as it glowered at Extermination. Its tentacles flicked through the air, and it appeared as furious as could be. Extermination swept her gaze over it, and said, "Oh, so you also had a hidden backup plan. You hid your true core inside your colossal body, so even after it was destroyed, you were still able to manifest your true core and stay alive. Humph! After being destroyed by the Genesis world of the last era, how could I not have a backup plan?" Hysteria humphed coldly. "Anyway, it's also good that you didn't die. Personally killing you will give me a great sense of achievement," Extermination said. She suddenly reached over, with her target being the golden orb above the fuzzy door. "In your dreams!" Ling Han shouted as he directly charged over, throwing a fist at the same time. After going through all this trouble, Extermination's true aim was most likely this golden orb, right? He definitely couldn't let her succeed. Whoosh! Hysteria also moved, brandishing its tentacles as it charged over. Pun! 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 The 3 elites became engaged in an intense battle. Hysteria had definitely been the most powerful of the 3 before, yet its dimensional-level self-destruction had naturally changed the situation. Even though its true core wasn't destroyed, the new body that it had manifested was 1,000,000 times weaker than before. In terms of raw power, it was even weaker than Extermination now. On the flip side, however, it was no longer a dimension. What did this signify? This signified that it could use heavenly venerable seals. 1. Only a single symbol lit up on its body, yet this symbol alone was able to increase its power by countless folds. As it lashed out with its tentacles, it was surprisingly able to unleash a battle prowess equivalent to 1/10 of its prime. Just like Ling Han, it had also mastered all of the heavenly venerable seals. This was easily understandable. Just how long had it lived for? And just what kind of existence was it? Would it have been difficult to deduce all of the heavenly venerable seals? However, it was still Ling Han who had the upper hand. His power was the greatest, so neither Hysteria nor Extermination was able to rival his powerful punches. Pun pun! The 2 ultimate elites were continuously sent flying by him. Right now, there was no one who could rival Ling Han. He was the undisputed #1 elite in the world. After scheming for so long, was Extermination truly going to end up empty-handed? Were all her efforts truly to no avail? Extermination unleashed a long cry before dashing toward the golden orb. "Not so fast," Ling Han said coldly. He dashed over and threw a punch. Pun! Extermination was surprisingly smashed into pieces. Ling Han was astonished. Even though his punches were powerful, they shouldn't have been powerful enough to shatter her. After all, that was Extermination. Sure enough, Extermination's shattered body continued to dash toward the fuzzy door. With the golden orb at the center, her shattered body then started to knit back together. "Ha ha! The secret of the world is mine!" She laughed, with her raven hair fluttering in the wind. "Extermination!" Chong Yen and the others howled. They were all filled with raging fury. Before allying with her, it had been agreed that they would also obtain a portion of this treasure. This was a crucial treasure that would decide whether they could advance to the 8th tier or not. "Did you people really think that I would honor my promises and Tao oaths?" Extermination asked. She roared with laughter, and continued smugly. "Bunch of fools! If I advance to the 8th tier and jump out of this world, will the so-called Tao oaths still be able to constrain me? Extermination was truly a shrewd and scheming person. She screwed people over no matter who they were. Ling Han charged over and roared. If Dao's can't constrain you, then let me blast you into oblivion! He threw a furious punch at Extermination. The two of them became locked in a fierce battle again. However, after swallowing that golden orb, Extermination's power surprisingly started to rise explosively in an exponential manner. Boundless energy rolled through the void, funneling into Extermination's body. Ha! Once I absorb the power of this entire void, I'll obtain the power to shatter that door and enter a new world. Extermination laughed heartily, with a smug expression on her face. Everything was under her control, from the beginning to the end. Chapter 3082 Dividing the Energy. Chapter 3082 Dividing the Energy. 3082 Dividing the Energy. Huh! Ling Han was astonished. He discovered that even though most of the energy was funneling into Extermination, there was also quite a noticeable amount of energy flowing into him. The sixth type of fundamental power grew stronger and stronger in his body, and this allowed him to absorb the surrounding energy quicker and quicker. At the same time, it was as if all of the dimensions in his body had been activated, and they were filled with vigor as they voraciously absorbed the fundamental power and charged toward the transcendent level. Secret codes of life. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. After engulfing the entire Genesis world, Hysteria had naturally formed new secret codes of life as well. These were secret codes that contained the core secret of the Genesis world. No wonder Hysteria had become so powerful before. However, Extermination's actions had caused it to self-destruct, which resulted in these core secrets of the world being exposed as well. Now, Extermination had managed to obtain these complete secret codes of life, so it was only natural that her power increased explosively. Why hadn't Ling Han managed to encounter such a situation? Ling Han pondered for a moment before coming to a sudden realization. He had only been at the 6th tier before, so due to the limit of his cultivation, he hadn't been able to elevate his dimensions at a quick speed. Of course, his speed had already been incredible to begin with. He had cultivated all of his dimensions to the high level in just 10 billion years. Now that he had advanced to the 7th tier and raised his upper limit, he was naturally able to extract fundamental power at an even quicker speed. Moreover, as his cultivation grew and stabilized, this speed would also continue to increase. In addition to this, the existence of the Genesis world before had also introduced some form of restriction and equilibrium. This had definitely affected Ling Han's speed as well. However, the situation was completely different now. The Genesis world was no more, and the vast energy in the void all funneled toward Ling Han and Extermination. That's mine! Hysteria roared as it charged over. It had also managed to catch a glimpse of the secret codes of life at that time. Otherwise, it couldn't have become so powerful. Thus, it was also able to absorb some of the surging energy. Anyhow, the golden orb wasn't simply an orb that contained the secret codes of life. At the same time, it was also something that could gather fundamental power together. Otherwise, one wouldn't be able to absorb the secret codes of life so quickly even if they obtained it. Ling Han, Extermination, and Hysteria battled against each other as they fought to absorb this energy. Chong Yen and the others also wanted to grab a slice of this energy. However, to say nothing of the fact that they were too weak, they would be sent flying with a single punch. They wouldn't be able to absorb this energy even if they were powerful enough. After all, without grasping the secret codes of life, would they have the right to absorb this energy? All they could do was stand aside and watch on. However, this was something that pertained to whether they could reach the 8th tier or not. This huge opportunity was sitting right there in front of them, yet they were powerless to do anything but stand there and watch. This pained them so much that the rims of their eyes were about to crack. Meanwhile, Lin Luo and the others weren't worried about this fact. Instead, they frowned slightly as they worried about which of the 3 ultimate elites would eventually emerge victorious. If it wasn't Ling Han, then the situation would become as dire as could be. Boom! Waves of energy crashed through the void. The void was non-sentient, nor did it have a will. It simply operated within the boundaries of some regulation. In the view of the void, the destruction of the Genesis world simply meant that it needed to create a new one. Thus, boundless energy surged over, creating an environment that could birth a new world. What lay at the center of this surging energy was none other than the golden orb. This was the secret code of the Genesis world. This energy was far too powerful and immense, so much so that there was more than enough to satisfy Ling Han, extermination, and hysteria. In fact, there was so much energy that the three of them were almost about to explode under the pressure. To destroy a world required magnificent power. In the same way, to create a world also required magnificent power. The three beings had no option but to stop, focusing their full effort on refining the terrifying amount of energy instead. Otherwise, they would explode under the titanic pressure. The three of them sat down, absorbing the boundless energy and transforming it into their own. Inside Ling Han's body, the sixth type of fundamental power quickly reached a satiated state. He had advanced to the peak stage of the seventh tier. His cultivation speed was simply unfathomable. However, this was largely because the current situation was far too unique. After all, how many times would the Genesis world be destroyed and recreated? After reaching the peak stage of the seventh tier, the six fundamental powers inside him also reached a state of perfect equilibrium. Upon channeling them, Ling Han could create a terrifying absorption power. The dimensions inside Ling Han continued to grow. If it were he who had obtained the golden orb, the void would have potentially stopped funneling energy over once he raised one or several of his dimensions to the transcendent level. This was because there were far too many dimensions inside him. By just elevating their levels a little, he could quickly give birth to a brand new Genesis world. Now, however, the golden orb was inside Extermination's body. Even though she had obtained the secret codes of life, allowing her to manifest new dimensions, there were far too few dimensions inside her to begin with. Moreover, the speed of manifesting new dimensions would definitely be very slow. When Extermination cultivated all of her dimensions to the transcendent level, she had no option but to stop her extraction of the boundless energy. She needed to create some new dimensions first. Only after that could she continue to absorb energy to cultivate them. Since this was the case, how could she compete with Ling Han in terms of speed? This issue affected Hysteria even more severely. There were no dimensions inside its body, or perhaps there were only one or two, so it quickly reached a state of fullness. It was forced to retreat lest it exploded into pieces again. It brandished its 8 tentacles, and it was filled with jealousy and fury. It was clearly it that had engulfed the Genesis world, and it was clearly it that had created this great opportunity. Yet, it was being forced to back down so quickly? How could it tolerate this? Hysteria swung its tentacles at Ling Han and Extermination. However, the void was filled with surging energy so concentrated that it was almost tangible. As a result, Hysteria's attacks failed to hit its targets. Not only that, but its tentacles were also reflected back by the dense energy. Hysteria unleashed several more attacks to vent its fury, yet these were all to no avail. It could only give up and turn its attention to the doorway of light instead. Beyond this was a new world. Once it left this void, left this small pond, what awaited it would be great opportunities that were far superior to the measly benefits in this small place. And after it left, it would turn around to shatter this doorway of light. You people can stay in this small pond and rot to death. It charged forward, attempting to squeeze into the doorway of light. However, it immediately discovered that it couldn't fit into the doorway no matter what. It was as if the doorway were supremely tough, and Hysteria couldn't squeeze itself through it no matter how hard it tried. It could only advance a single inch and no further. It couldn't get out at all. Hysteria shrunk itself down, all the way until it only measured 1 inch in height. It then charged at the doorway of light again. However, now that its body was smaller, the distance that it could travel through the doorway also became lesser. It still couldn't exit. Arg! It bellowed in fury. So be it if it couldn't obtain the huge opportunity presented by the boundless energy, yet it couldn't even leave through this door now? I can't leave? Then I'll destroy you. Hysteria unleashed an attack at the doorway of light. It wouldn't be so naive as to think that Ling Han or Extermination would be generous enough to take it with them when they left. So, since it had to stay trapped in this place and rot to death, then it would force the two of them to suffer the same fate as well. It frenziedly attacked the doorway of light, yet the doorway appeared to be surprisingly sturdy as it remained completely unharmed. No, it couldn't be described as sturdy. Instead, it wasn't enduring any force at all. Hysteria attacked the doorway for several days, yet its efforts were all in vain. It attempted to charge through the doorway again. However, it discovered that even the supremely tough nature of the doorway seemed to have disappeared. Right now, it was as if the doorway were nothing more than a projection, an intangible projection that didn't exist at all. Since it didn't exist, how could Hysteria destroy it or pass through it? Hysteria went wild with rage. It turned its attention to Lin Luo, Chong Yen, and the others. Since this was the case, then it would kill these people first. Chapter 3083 Becoming Hostile. Chapter 3083 Becoming Hostile. 3083 Becoming Hostile. Ling Han absorbed energy as if his life depended on it, and new dimensions were born one after another inside his body. While this happened, the older dimensions also continued to grow more powerful, advancing toward the transcendent level. It was unknown how long had passed, but his body suddenly shuddered at some moment, after which a burst of power surged through him. One of his dimensions had reached the transcendent level. Immediately afterward, a second dimension reached the transcendent level, and then a third, a fourth, and so on. The dimensions inside him continued to advance to the transcendent level. Time continued to fly past. Right now, the number of dimensions inside Ling Han had already gone from over 400,000 to over 1 million. Moreover, over half of them had already reached the transcendent level. There were still more dimensions being born, and there were still more dimensions advancing to the transcendent level. Ling Han truly didn't dare to imagine just how powerful he was now. One transcendent dimension alone was already equivalent to at least 10 ultimate elites at the peak stage of the 7th tier. Right now, he was about to reach a whopping 1 million transcendent dimensions in his body. Just how devastating would his power be? It would be far superior to the destroyed Genesis world. Huh! Ling Han was slightly surprised. He discovered that the flow of energy had slowed down. It wasn't that he was losing to Extermination and absorbing less energy than her, but rather, less energy was being provided to them by the void. Thus, the flow of energy naturally slowed down. Ling Han pondered this for a moment before coming to a sudden realization. He and Extermination had exhausted the energy in the void. However, the void was boundless, so how could it be exhausted? They had never been to the edges of the void, but since it could be regarded as a small pond, this implied that there was definitely a boundary. It was only because the void was far too large compared to Ling Han and the others that they had never been able to reach this boundary. In any case, just how much energy had Ling Han and Extermination absorbed? Ling Han had cultivated 1 million realms to the transcendent level. This was absolutely terrifying. Extermination was inferior to Ling Han, yet she had probably been able to cultivate at least 100,000 dimensions to the transcendent level as well. The two of them had actually exhausted the void. It wasn't long before the last wisp of energy also disappeared. At this moment, the void had truly become void. Not even a sliver of energy remained. What? In the distance, the brawling Hysteria, Lin Luo, Chong Yen, and the others had no option but to stop. They were unable to extract any more energy from the void to replenish what they were expending. In fact, they couldn't even sense the fundamental particles anymore. How could they not be stunned? Once they used up all of their energy, they would also slowly weaken, with their battle prowess falling from the 7th tier bit by bit, all the way until they became mere mortals. This caused them to feel deep astonishment and fear. Ha ha! Extermination roared with laughter, and her raven hair billowed in the void. There were over 100,000 transcendent dimensions in her body, and this resulted in her power growing hundreds of millions-fold compared to before. After planning and scheming for so long, she had finally achieved her goal. Extermination! Hysteria roared. Its previous self had stolen its great opportunity from right under its nose. This caused it to boil with fury. Humph! Just who do you think you are? Extermination said as she launched a palm strike at Hysteria. Hysteria brandished a tentacle to block this attack, yet its tentacle was immediately severed, causing golden blood to spray through the air. This released a small amount of energy back into the desolate void. Pathetically weak, Extermination said coldly. Everyone inhaled sharply. Hysteria had once been invincible, yet it was now this fragile and weak? Extermination looked at Chong Yen and the other ultimate elites from the Genesis world of the last era. An eerie smile appeared on her face, and she said, "I'm so sorry that I've disappointed you people. However, I had no other option. None of you have grasped the secret codes of life, so how can you possibly advance to the 8th tier? However, I can still bring you people out of this place and lead you into a new world. Perhaps this new world is infinitely large, and perhaps the great opportunities in our current world are nothing compared to what lies in this new world." Even though Chong Yen and the 4 others were extremely pissed off by her words, the only thing they could do right now was to suppress their anger and accept this reality. Since it was impossible for them to reach the 8th tier, then only one other path remained open to them. That was to leave this place. In fact, they had also tried to enter the doorway of light just then, yet they had suffered the exact same fate as Hysteria. It was as if the doorway didn't exist at all. Anyhow, once they left and entered that larger world, perhaps they would quickly find an opportunity to advance to the 8th tier? They would continue to tolerate extermination for the moment. Chong Yen and the others flew toward extermination, all of them eagerly looking forward to a bright and beautiful future. Ling Han didn't stop them. He wasn't in a hurry. Extermination had indeed become countless times more powerful than before. However, had he not? He could only be more powerful than her. Everything was within his grasp. Chong Yen and the 4 others, as well as Golden Silk Moth and 10,000 Shadows, all flew toward extermination. A glorious future awaited them. Extremely eager, aren't you? Extermination said with an eerie smile. Do you want to see the world that lies beyond this small pond? Expressions of yearning appeared on the faces of Chong Yen and the others. They had already reached the end of their cultivation path, and it was impossible for them to take another step further. The only way they could advance was by jumping out of this heaven and earth. Curiosity was a trait shared by everyone. This was especially the case for powerful beings like them, and they were even more eager to see what lay beyond their own heaven and earth. And the answer to this question was about to be revealed. Pooh! A streak of blood squirted into the air. Something unexpected happened. Extermination suddenly lashed out, stabbing her hand into Chong Yan's back and thrusting it forward so that it exited from his chest. Clasped in her slender hand was a beating heart. Arg! Chong Yan wailed in agony. What did it matter that he was a 7th-tier ultimate elite? Standing before extermination, his once invincible physique was now as fragile as paper. It was completely unable to resist her attack. Extermination withdrew her hand, causing Chong Yen to instantly fall forward into the void. His face was as white as a sheet. 7th-tier elites were undying, and they could stay alive even if their hearts were destroyed. However, it was also because of this that each part of their body was extremely precious. After losing their heart, it would take them heaven knew how long to grow a new one. Why had extermination suddenly attacked him? Was she killing her meritorious subordinates now? She no longer had a need for them, so she was going to exterminate them now? Shatter Mountains, Golden Silk Moth, and the others hurriedly shot back in retreat, their eyes filled with shock and terror as they looked at extermination. Once rulers of the world, these 7th-tier elites were now no longer the high and mighty beings of the past. Standing before Ling Han and extermination, they were so weak that they were barely worth a mention. Meanwhile, the once peerless Hysteria could only be regarded as a 2nd-tier force. Hysteria had also tried to kill Chong Yen, Lin Luo, and the others just then, but it had only been able to suppress them and not kill them. In comparison, it was abundantly clear that extermination and Ling Han were now countless times more powerful than it. Why? Chong Yen howled in rage. Losing his heart was a grave wound that would require tens of billions of years to recover from. However, the Genesis world had already been destroyed, and the energy in the void had already been exhausted. So, how could he possibly recover? A cruel smile spread across Extermination's face. She lashed out again, and the sound of shattering bones sounded again and again. Shatter Mountains, Big Dipper, and the two other ultimate elites from the Genesis world of the last era all suffered harrowing fates. Their arms and legs were crushed, and their hearts and lungs were also plucked. Was she torturing them? Lin Luo and the others all shook their heads. No matter how they looked at it, it seemed as if Extermination was exacting revenge on them for some personal grievance. Extermination wasn't truly extermination. Instead, this person had simply taken control of this body. So, just who in the world was she? What kind of grudges did she hold against Chong Yen and the others? Are you people curious about who I really am? Extermination asked with a cold smile. Chapter 3084 3084 True Identity. Chapter 3084 3084 True Identity. 3084 True Identity. Was the truth finally about to be revealed? What was Extermination's true identity? Just who in the world was she? Pun! Extermination launched a palm strike, and Chong Yen's left arm was instantly transformed into a cloud of blood. Chong Yen howled in agony. However, more than the pain, he felt an unspeakable sense of terror. The only thing that remained in this heaven and earth was void nothingness. There was not an inkling of energy to be extracted. In other words, it would be impossible for him to recover from these grave wounds. At the same time, it would be impossible for him to regenerate any cultivation that he lost. How could he not feel utter despair? Why was Extermination attacking him with such viciousness? Just how had he offended her to deserve such a wretched fate? The hope for a glorious future sits right here in front of you, yet I'm going to crush your dreams just like this. How does this feel? Extermination laughed. She wasn't targeting Chong Yen alone, and she was also targeting Big Dipper, Shatter Mountains, and the others. Their limbs and bodies had all been brutally mutilated by her. Ling Han didn't stop her. Chong Yen and the others had asked for this themselves. They had insisted on siding with a vicious monster. Moreover, Ling Han also wanted to find out Extermination's true identity. Thus, he would allow her to act smugly for the moment. Do you feel despair? Do you feel regret? Extermination sneered and taunted them each time she attacked them. Her words were dripping with venom, and Chong Yen and the others truly wanted to cry. They had believed her Tao oath, and they had thought that Extermination was truly going to cooperate with them. They hadn't imagined that Extermination would turn hostile at the very last moment. They were unwilling to accept this fate. However, what could they do now? At that time, you people lied to me and tricked me into blocking Extermination. You promised me that you would only unleash that attack after I retreated to a safe distance. Yet, what did you people do? Extermination said coldly. Her voice was filled with resentment. What? Chong Yen and the others were stunned, so much so that even their heads went numb. A name, a figure suddenly flashed across their minds. They were filled with sheer disbelief. Why you're Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand. What? Extermination's true identity is actually Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand? How is this possible? Didn't Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand die when the Genesis world of the last era was destroyed? Back then, Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand had held Extermination back, while Chong Yen and the others had detonated the Genesis world and unleashed an ultimate attack. Extermination had been blasted into pieces, and Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand's divine sense had also been obliterated. Only an empty shell of his body had remained. Now, however, they were being told that Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand was actually still alive. And he had actually taken over Extermination's body? This was astounding. This was inconceivable. That's right. Do you people finally remember now? Extermination said as she roared with laughter. Her expression appeared especially sinister at this moment. Pa! She threw another palm strike, instantly crushing Chongyan's head. "Oh, I'm truly sorry. I accidentally used too much force." "Ah, you're dead?" she said as she cocked her head and looked at Chongyan's lifeless body. Her strike had obliterated Chongyan's head and destroyed his mind. He was naturally as dead as could be. 7th tier elites being indestructible and undying was now a fact of the past. There was no such thing as being indestructible and undying anymore. Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the others all sighed in emotion. As it turned out, Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand hadn't sacrificed himself willingly. Instead, he had been tricked by the others. No wonder the current extermination was so cruel and resentful. Extermination turned around to look at Shatter Mountains and the others. A menacing smile appeared on her face, and she said, "However, you people would have never imagined this, huh? When the Genesis world was destroyed, all of the souls were fused together, including mine. Even though most of my soul was destroyed, a small sliver of it was fortunate enough to remain intact. Countless souls fused together, allowing my soul to recover. In fact, my soul became even more powerful than before. However, it was a shame that I was nothing more than a soul. I was like rootless duckweed. After countless years, I did indeed manage to find my own body. At that time, I could have chosen to become Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand again." Extermination paused for a moment, and swept her gaze over Shatter Mountains and the others. Her voice dripped with bitter resentment as she continued. "However, choosing to become Yellow Sand would mean that my strength would remain the same as before. If that were the case, then how could I repay your kindness? So, I found Extermination's body and used the remnant power of the Genesis world to repair it. Do you know how long I spent? 3,000 epochs. Don't be surprised. Even though the history of this Genesis world isn't that long, there was a gap of more than 2,000 epochs between this Genesis world and the previous Genesis world. Why was I able to persist? It was because of my resentment toward you people. I was unwilling to accept my fate. I wanted to seek revenge. I repaired Extermination's body and became its host. However, far too long had passed already. Moreover, the old Genesis world had already lost all of its life force. Without a special trigger, I was also unable to revive. It was at this moment that I discovered that not only had I lived, but Extermination had also lived. It had transformed into Hysteria. So, I activated the power of the Genesis world of the last era and unleashed waves of energy to draw those fools over. I used them to reactivate that broken world. If I hadn't done this, then I would have slumbered in the void forever. As for what happened afterward, I'm sure that I don't need to explain. All of you already know. The funniest thing is, before your minds fell into a slumber, I imprinted a mark of life on them and purposely revealed that there was a huge secret hidden in Feng Wooding's body. You were convinced that he could lead you to the world's core and help you advance to the 8th tier. Absolutely hilarious. I didn't give this much thought at that time, because I didn't think that I would be able to live again. I simply wanted to play a sick joke on you people. Just how disappointed would you feel after finding out that it was all a lie? To be tricked by someone who had died countless years ago. Even if I had been dead, I would have still laughed in my grave. However, I still prefer the current situation. What do you people say? Extermination finally stopped speaking. There was a complicated look of satisfaction on her face as she looked at Shatter Mountains and the others. Once the truth was revealed, everything suddenly became understandable and simple. The current Extermination was Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand, the person who had been screwed over by them in the past. Thus, she was filled with bitter resentment and a thirst for revenge. Simply killing Chongyan and the others was already unable to satiate her thirst for revenge. Thus, she had meticulously formulated and executed a plan, extending her lie that pertained to the world's core. She had convinced Chongyan and the others that they could eventually advance to the 8th tier. It was also because of this that they had willingly joined her side. In reality, Chongyan and the others had indeed provided her with a lot of help. Otherwise, Hysteria wouldn't have been able to engulf the entire Genesis world so quickly. You people don't need to dream about entering the new world, Nor do you need to dream about advancing to the 8th tier, Extermination said calmly. All right, you people already know the truth now, so I assume you can die in peace? Yellow Sand, you're truly vicious, and you're truly able to endure hardship. Shatter Mountain spat through gritted teeth. In order to exact revenge, Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand had even been willing to enter the body of a woman. Just this alone was already astonishing enough. Not only that, but she had never revealed an iota of resentment or hatred toward her 5 mortal enemies. Either she had appeared normal the entire time. Her ability to conceal her true emotions was truly terrifying. After some further thought, however, this also made sense. She had already suffered through 3,000 epics by herself, so what else was there that she couldn't endure? Die! Extermination roared as she unleashed an attack at Shatter Mountains and the others. Pun! There was a tremendous shake, and a look of astonishment spread across Extermination's breathtakingly beautiful face. Her strike had been blocked by Ling Han. Chapter 3085 3085 Regret or No Regret? Chapter 3085 3085 Regret or No Regret? 3085 Regret or No Regret? Ling Han actually made a move, and stopped Extermination from committing murder. If Extermination wanted to kill Lin Luo and the others, then it was naturally not strange for Ling Han to make a move. But why did he want to save Shatter Mountains and the others? This scene was truly confusing and inconceivable. You dare to stop me? Extermination said balefully, flames flickering in her eyes. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, I'm going to kill these 4 people with my own hands. I'm already quite displeased that you have killed one of them, and you still want to do it again. Extermination was furious. Her black hair stood on ends. She had hated Chong Yen and the others for as long as 3,000 epochs. What kind of deep hatred was this? Now that her cultivation had reached a peak, and she had tricked Chong Yan's group of 5 miserably, the climax was naturally to kill all 5 of them one by one at this moment, and obtain a perfect revenge. But she was stopped by someone after killing only Chong Yen? She was extremely displeased and furious. Since that's the case, I'll kill you first! Extermination shouted, and charged towards Ling Han. Ling Han attacked, and exchanged blows with Extermination. Pun! 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 The intense battle started again. Currently, the strength of these 2 persons had already reached a level that even those at the peak of the 7th tier could not hope to catch up to. A single ripple of energy could not only send 7th tiers flying, but also cause them to vomit blood endlessly. Even Hysteria couldn't withstand it, and had no choice but to retreat under the surging energy waves. However, it was too powerful, and the energy waves alone couldn't injure it. You're actually this strong as well? Extermination was shocked. She had originally thought that after absorbing all the energy in the void, she would be able to crush any existence. She did not expect that Ling Han was actually not any weaker than her. How is this possible? It had to be known that only after she had obtained the Golden Sphere, which was the complete secret code of life, had she absorbed such a vast amount of energy. As for Ling Han, the secret code of life that he had obtained was not complete at all, so how could it compare to hers? Extermination was unable to accept this. Ling Han's current strength was completely unreasonable. Surprised, right? Ling Han said calmly. There's something that would shock you even more. He had only used 10% of his power, and this was already enough to fight against Extermination. Thus, if he went all out, suppressing Extermination would be a piece of cake. Extermination gritted her teeth, and shouted, Damn brat, how dare you snatch my opportunity! Hysteria didn't know that if it wanted to break out of this small pond, it had to obtain the energy of the entire void. Only then could it blast open the barrier that transcended the dimensional level and enter the mysterious and unknown new world. Extermination knew of this because she had witnessed the destruction of the Genesis world twice, and had even obtained the tiny bits of consciousness of the Genesis world. But now, she speculated that half of the power had been obtained by Ling Han. This meant that she was unable to open that door and enter the new world. How could he do this? This world, including the void, had been sucked dry, and no new Genesis world could be born, leaving behind an inexhaustible emptiness. Who could withstand living in such a world for countless epochs? Just thinking about it was enough to drive one crazy. No, there was still hope. Extermination stared at Ling Han. As long as I kill you and obtain the energy in your body, I can still open that door and enter into a new world. Stop dreaming! Hysteria sneered. That doesn't exist at all. Otherwise, I would have gone out long ago. It was no longer a match for its previous incarnation, but if it had the chance, it didn't mind delivering a blow to this opponent from its previous life. Extermination sneered. Idiot, what you're seeing isn't a real door at all, but coordinates, a weak point in space. As long as you absorb the power of the void and bombard that point, the real door will open. Oh, so that was how it was. Hysteria, Shatter Mountains, and the others all came to a realization. No wonder they couldn't charge out no matter what. It turned out that they were too weak, and didn't have the qualifications to open that door. It was no wonder that the door didn't seem to exist. It was untouchable and unreachable. Indeed, it was only a guide, and not a real existence. Extermination let out a long howl, and used all sorts of techniques repeatedly, attacking Ling Han. However, Ling Han ignored her, and instead focused his gaze on Shatter Mountains and the others. You old bastards, I told you to work hard at the front line, but not only did you not listen to my advice, you even hooked up with this damn transvestite. You even colluded with Hysteria and caused the destruction of the Genesis world. Let me ask you, do you regret it? He moved as fast as lightning, and grabbed Shatter Mountains in his hand. As early as when Ling Han had just advanced into the 6th tier, Shatter Mountains had already been no match for him. Now, not only had Ling Han reached the 7th tier, he had also absorbed almost 90% of the entire void's energy. There were millions of transcendent dimensions in his body. What kind of concept was this? To say nothing of one 7th tier, even if 100 million 7th tiers joined forces, they might not be able to stop him. Shatter Mountains was shocked, and his entire body was covered in cold sweat. Put him down! Extermination roared, her tone sharp. She hated Shatter Mountains and the others to death, and it was precisely because she hated them to the core that she had to personally kill these 4 people. Otherwise, how could she vent the anger in her heart? After so many years, what kept her from going crazy was the desire for revenge. Now, as she reached the peak, she was about to taste the sweetness of revenge. However, this satisfaction was suddenly snatched away. How could she not be furious? She acted as if she had gone mad, and attacked Ling Han with all her might. Lin Luo and all the others had complicated expressions on their faces. A dignified ultimate elite of 7th tier had actually become a toy that was being fought over. It wasn't that Ling Han and Extermination wanted the battle prowess of the 7th tier, they just wanted to kill him with their own hands. Even though they were standing on opposite sides with Shatter Mountains, Lin Luo and the others were incomparably emotional because they were also 7th tiers, so it was inevitable that they would have some complicated emotions. As for Big Dipper, Half Moon, and Mysterious Feather, these 3 heavenly venerates only felt a sense of empathy towards Shatter Mountains. Being targeted by both Ling Han and Extermination, how could they not feel distressed in their hearts when either one could easily crush the 3 of them to death? After the death of Shatter Mountains, it would be their turn. Ling Han completely didn't care, and one of his hands casually parried Extermination's incomparably terrifying attacks, while his other hand gripped Shatter Mountain's neck. With the force of his 5 fingers, Shatter Mountain's neck bones emitted crisp cracking sounds. What indestructible physique of 7th tier! In front of the current Ling Han, it was so fragile that it couldn't even withstand a single blow. Old thief, do you regret it or not? Ling Han asked again. I regret it, Shatter Mountain said in a hoarse voice. He truly regretted cooperating with Extermination and bringing his own end. He didn't even know that he had been betrayed. And they just had to go against a freakish fellow like Ling Han. Otherwise, with Ling Han fighting against Extermination now, they might even have a chance of winning. As long as Ling Han won, he would be able to open that door and bring them to the new world. What a happy ending that would be! But now, it was too late for regrets. It's good that you regret it. Ling Han nodded, and squeezed his 5 fingers. Pa! Shatter Mountains turned into a shower of blood. His gaze was baleful as he stared at Big Dipper, Mysterious Feather, and Half Moon. Chapter 3086 3086 Killing Ultimate Elites Like Slaughtering Chickens. Chapter 3086 3086 Killing Ultimate Elites Like Slaughtering Chickens. 3086 Killing Ultimate Elites Like Slaughtering Chickens. No! Extermination screamed as if she had lost both her parents, but also like she had gone mad. Vengeance against Chong Yen and the others was already her obsession. She didn't know how many times she had thought about how to kill them one by one, but the immortality and indestructibility of a 7th tier wasn't just for show. It was only now that she finally had the ability to casually slaughter 7th tiers. However, Shatter Mountains had been killed by Ling Han. This simply made her heart ache. You bastard, I'm going to shred your corpse into 10,000 pieces. Extermination attacked with all her might, intending to blast Ling Han into pieces. Hee hee. Ling Han only smiled faintly. Previously, everything had been manipulated by extermination, and Hysteria, the great demon of 2 generations, Lin Luo, Chong Yen, and other 7th tier ultimate elites could be said to have become her chess pieces, played easily in the palm of her hand. Now, it was no longer up to her. Ling Han fixed his gaze on Half Moon, and charged straight at him. Previously, Half Moon and the other 2 ultimate elites had already started fleeing. However, they no longer had any fundamental power left to extract and utilize. They could only rely on their own power to display their might. This greatly affected their speed. In terms of power, who else could compare to Ling Han? Ling Han had only taken a single step forward, but had already caught up to Half Moon. He reached out to grab him. How dare you! Extermination let out an enraged roar, and chased after him crazily. But could she make it in time? Ling Han stretched out his hand, and Half Moon fell into it. Old bastard, do you regret it? Half Moon gritted his teeth. He had already seen it before. Shatter Mountains became a dead man after saying that he regretted it. Therefore, he had to grit his teeth and keep his mouth shut no matter what. No regrets? Ling Han exerted strength in his hands, and under the pressure of unparalleled power, Half Moon's bones made a cracking sound. His face even turned purple-red as he felt extreme pain. Instead, it was extermination that stopped. She knew that it was impossible for her to snatch him back from Ling Han's hands. So, she set her eyes on Big Dipper and Mysterious Feather. Although she couldn't exact a perfect revenge, it was better than not being able to kill even one of them, right? She flew towards Big Dipper. Big Dipper and Mysterious Feather really didn't know how to describe their feelings at this moment. As dignified 7th tier ultimate elites, they had actually fallen so far from Gracito the point of becoming prey that were hunted by others. This was truly too tragic. 7th tier. They were 7 tiers, the greatest in the world. Yellow sand! Hysteria roared, and moved its tentacles to grab him. It also hated extermination the most, even if it clearly knew that it was no match for her, but it still came forward to stop her. Scram! Extermination slashed down with her hand, and Hysteria was instantly sent flying, with golden blood flowing as another tentacle was cut off. However, Hysteria was laughing loudly because Ling Han had already caught up and intercepted extermination. Ling Han shook his head inwardly. This Hysteria was really stupid. Even without it trying to hinder her, Ling Han could easily catch up to extermination because he had obtained 90% of the power of the void. He was absolutely invincible. Forget it. He didn't need to feel sorry for it anyway. Do you regret it or not? Ling Han parried extermination, while still suppressing Half Moon. The terrifying power was simply not something a 7th-tier physique could contend against, causing Half Moon to scream incessantly. He persisted for a long time before finally saying, I regret it. Firstly, he really couldn't withstand it any longer. He felt like he was better off dead than alive. He might as well pray for a good death to free himself. Secondly, this was indeed the truth. He regretted it. He regretted listening to Extermination's words. He regretted not going all out and killing Ling Han, who had still been very weak at the time. All right, then die. Ling Han squeezed hard. Pa, Half Moon also turned into a mist of blood. Ling Han! Ling Han! Ling Han! Extermination roared loudly, her eyes burning with rage, reaching a state of extreme fury. What are you screaming for? It's not your turn yet, Ling Han said calmly. He looked at Mysterious Feather and Big Dipper. Who was going to be next? As his gaze swept over them, Mysterious Feather and the other felt a sense of sorrow and endless despair. Extermination had also entered a berserk state. She panted heavily with a ferocious expression on her face. Her eyes suddenly lit up as she stared at Hysteria. If she killed it and plundered its power, then she would be evenly matched with Ling Han. Now, she would definitely win. Yes, that was it. She let out a long howl and charged towards Hysteria. Ordinary 7th tiers were useless as their power was less than 1/millionth of hers. What was the use of plundering them? Ling Han smiled, and his figure darted out. He actually arrived first, grabbing one of Hysteria's tentacles, and then abruptly flung it out. Pun! Hysteria instantly transformed into a streak of light that shot toward the endless void. It's not your turn yet. Stay in line and wait, Ling Han said, and turning around, he charged towards Big Dipper. Big Dipper also stopped running. He knew that Ling Han was already strong enough to instantly obliterate heaven and earth. I regret it, he said directly. Rather than being ravaged and killed, it was better to seek a good death. Pun! Ling Han threw a punch, and blasted Big Dipper into smithereens without showing any mercy. Since he had betrayed them, he had to be prepared to die. Ling Han looked at Mysterious Feather again, and his killing intent did not diminish even after killing 3 ultimate elites. Instead, it became even more intense. Mysterious Feather also accepted his fate and closed his eyes. What I regret the most is listening to that B*TCH's words. Also, that I didn't kill you when I had the chance. Unrepentant! Ling Han snorted coldly, and threw a punch. Ping! Mysterious Feather was also killed. At this point, all of the ultimate elites of the Genesis world of the last era had been annihilated. Oh, actually that wasn't the case. Strictly speaking, there were also Extermination and Hysteria. They all came from the Genesis world of the last era. Golden Silk Moth and 10,000 Shadows trembled. In front of Ling Han, 7th tier elites were like toys, and could be blown to bits simply by a raise of his hand. They hadn't broken through to 7th tier for long, and hadn't enjoyed much of such prestige yet. They didn't want to die at all. Fearful things just had to come. Ling Han had already set his sights on them. What else do you have to say? Ling Han asked calmly. What could they say? What was the use of regretting now? Hadn't Shatter Mountains and the others all been killed? 10,000 Shadows' first reaction was to flee. Facing Ling Han, this had already become his normal reaction, but now he was completely unable to move his legs. He only felt that his entire body was powerless, and he was unable to move at all. Golden Silk Moth gritted his teeth, and knelt down in front of Ling Han. Greetings, Master! Ling Han was stunned, and only then did he remember. Back then, when he was at the 5th tier, he had already suppressed Golden Silk Moth, wanting to take in a 7th tier as his servant. Later on, Golden Silk Moth had run away, and he thought no more of this matter. Now that the Golden Silk Moth was calling himself a servant, it was obvious that it wanted to use this to trade for his life. I don't need a useless slave like you, Ling Han said. Betrayal required a price to be paid, so how could Ling Han be fooled just by him kneeling down and discarding his dignity? He stretched out his hands and grabbed outward. Golden Silk Moth and 10,000 Shadows landed onto his hands. 7th tiers. Hee. Right now, they were really nothing more than a trash-like existence. Since you have nothing to say, go die. Ling Han's arms jolted. Ping, ping. The 2 ultimate elites immediately turned into a rain of blood. Chapter 3087 3087 One Body. Chapter 3087 3087 One Body. 3087 One Body. Extermination's chest rose and fell rapidly. She was enraged, extremely enraged. Since Ling Han killed her people, she would die. She charged towards Lin Luo and the others. Ling Han humphed, and his figure moved swiftly, blocking Extermination's path. Your opponent is me, he said calmly. Pung, with a punch, Extermination was sent flying. What? Extermination's beautiful face paled. In this strike, she discovered that her strength was much inferior to Ling Han's. Damn transvestite, don't disgust me! Ling Han could feel his goosebumps rising. Thinking back to Extermination's flirtatious expression previously, all that remained was incomparable disgust. Deep down, Extermination was a man, and she was heavenly venerate yellow sand. Extermination let out a piercing scream. In her opinion, what difference was there in being a man or a woman? Having reached the height of the 7th tier, was there still a need to care about gender? However, after being insulted by Ling Han like this, she really couldn't tolerate it. Nonetheless, she did not engage in a fierce battle with Ling Han. Instead, she turned around and chased in the direction of where Hysteria had disappeared. Only by killing Hysteria and plundering its power would she be able to compete with Ling Han. Of course, she was being delusional, but this was also the only solution that she could think of now. She exerted a terrifying force, and her delicate body moved at an indescribable speed. She gave chase while searching for Hysteria's life force fluctuations. There was only emptiness here, and there were no more energy storms, so the aura of life couldn't be concealed. Even a little bit of it would have been distinctively evident. As Extermination tracked Hysteria down, her figure moved faster and faster. In just half a day, Hysteria's figure appeared ahead of her. With 2 severed tentacles, it looked rather miserable. Right now, Hysteria had already descended from its strongest level, but it was still unbelievably strong. It could still suppress Lin Luo and all the other heavenly venerates by itself. Die! Extermination charged over. Her 5 fingers were like claws as she grabbed Hysteria. Hysteria roared and attacked with its tentacles. Pun! Hysteria was naturally at a huge disadvantage in this exchange. Compared to Extermination, it was far inferior, and another one of its tentacles got blasted off again. Don't kill it! This one is also mine! Ling Han's voice rang out. He was calm and unruffled, just like a person who was protecting his food, warning others not to snatch his food. Extermination gritted her teeth. She attacked crazily. If she didn't kill Hysteria and use all its power, she wouldn't be able to suppress Ling Han. If she couldn't suppress Ling Han, she wouldn't be able to leave this space, and could only go crazy in this kind of emptiness and cold desolation. Ling Han also made his move. How could he allow Extermination to kill Hysteria? If it was to be killed, he would be the only one to do it. He easily blocked Extermination with one hand as he fixed his gaze upon Hysteria. Hysteria's remaining 5 tentacles fluttered gently. Facing Ling Han, it felt an unprecedented chill. It moved and pounced forward. However, its target was actually not Ling Han, but Extermination. Was it courting death? Even Ling Han had not expected that Hysteria would charge over, dashing towards Extermination. Not bad, not bad. Since you're going to die anyway, why don't you give me your power? At the very least, I'm still a manifestation of your previous life. Extermination laughed loudly as she extended her slender hand. Pooh! It directly pierced through Hysteria's head. Boom! Hysteria's 5 tentacles surged wildly, and its golden body rapidly dimmed. Its energy was rapidly depleting while continuously being plundered by Extermination. Ling Han originally wanted to stop her, but after thinking about it again, he decided to let it go. In fact, he had absorbed almost 90% of the Void's power by himself, while the remaining power had been divided between Hysteria and Extermination, with Extermination having taken up 90% of the remaining power. Therefore, it didn't matter whether the power of Hysteria was being absorbed by extermination or not. Let her rejoice in vain. Ling Han watched from the side. Very soon, extermination would know that what she was facing was an insurmountable mountain. Hysteria's golden body quickly turned silver, then white, and finally black, as if it was degenerating. This process was really fast. Extermination shook lightly, and Hysteria then turned to ashes and completely disappeared. The great calamity that had once harmed the 2 generations of Genesis world was gone just like that. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Lin Luo and the others also rushed over, and happened to see this last scene. They couldn't help but feel slightly emotional. Ling Han! Extermination shouted loudly. After absorbing the power of Hysteria, her power had increased by more than 10%, and she was filled with confidence, believing that it was enough to suppress Ling Han. At their heights, even a minute increase in power would have been staggering, not to mention increasing their power by 10%. It could even change the outcome of the battle. I'm not deaf, so there's no need to shout so loudly, Ling Han said calmly. He even dug his ears, appearing very nonchalant. I want you, Extermination said, but before she could say the words, to die, she was stunned. Then, she suddenly hugged her head. Hysteria, you're really haunting me. I've clearly destroyed your physical body, but you've entered my mind with your spirit. Ling Han's expression darkened slightly. This, I want you, wasn't expressed clearly, and was quite ambiguous. Moreover, the person who said this was a damn transvestite. Just thinking about it made one feel disgusted. You want to fight with me for control of this body? How naive! Extermination roared. Get out! Get out! But then, Extermination said, this body was originally mine. Even though you refined it, it is still more compatible with my soul. I am the master of this body. Get lost. I've plotted for so many years before this happened, and you want to reap the fruits of my labor? Winner takes all. Why are you spouting so much nonsense? Extermination seemed to be talking to herself, but Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the others all knew that this was actually 2 souls, Extermination and Hysteria, fighting for control of this body. This might seem a little confusing. Since Hysteria's physical body had already been destroyed and returned to its original form, it was better to call her Extermination, but Extermination was actually Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand. The 2 souls were fighting, and a strange scene appeared. Another head actually grew out of Extermination's neck. You! The original head shouted sharply. Of course, it represented Yellow Sand. Haha, this is my body. Even after being tempered by you for so many years, I can still obtain half of the command, the new head said. This was naturally Hysteria, the earliest Extermination. Get out of here! You're the one who should get lost! The 2 heads shouted at each other, each commanding one hand to fight. This? Ling Han felt speechless. Was this still the number 1 ferocious beast of the world? Why did he look like a freak and a retard? Forget it, I won't be watching such a show anymore. How disgusting. Since the 2 fiends had already merged into one, he would deal with them together. Ling Han threw a punch at Extermination. Ha! Extermination's 2 heads roared furiously at the same time as each one commanded the one hand on either side to meet Ling Han's attack. Chapter 3088 One Last Fight. Chapter 3088 One Last Fight. 3088 One Last Fight. Boom! Extermination exchanged a blow with Ling Han, but she was no match for Ling Han at all, and was instantly sent flying. Ling Han caught up to her, and swung his fist continuously, with each strike bearing enough power to crush Extermination. Extermination's 2 heads roared as they swung their hands with boundless power. However, in front of Ling Han, this kind of power could only be said to be insignificant, and was easily extinguished by a casual punch from Ling Han. Pun pun pun. After a few hundred punches, Extermination was beaten into a tragic state. However, she also had about 10% of Ling Han's strength. Thus, it would not be easy to kill her, at least not with just a few punches. "Let me do it, scram to the side," Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand's head said to Extermination's head. "I'll do it. I'm the true master of this body. Give me all the control," Extermination's head said indignantly. "Pun!" Ling Han punched out, and Extermination's body was instantly sent flying. "We can't go on like this. Like this, we'll both die together. Fuse!" Extermination and Yellow Sand looked at each other with determination. Ling Han was too powerful. They were inferior to him in the first place, yet they still had to compete for control over this body. Wasn't this courting death? Wang, Extermination's body emitted a powerful aura as the two souls began to fuse. They were truly at the end of their rope. Otherwise, who would be willing to merge their soul with another? In terms of soul possession, if one didn't like it, one could still switch to another body. However, once the souls were fused, they would truly be together forever, unless they died. Pun! Ling Han threw a punch, and Extermination was immediately sent flying. He chased after her. Pun pun pun, his fist struck out furiously, wanting to completely destroy this ancient great evil. Extermination's two heads were roaring. The two heads were then seen getting stuck tightly together, and sank into each other. They fused very quickly. This scene was quite scary and disgusting, but it wasn't just a fusion of the body. At the same time, it represented the unification of the two souls. From then on, there would no longer be any Extermination or Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand. In its place was a brand new soul. Boom! A terrifying aura surged, and the black dress on Extermination's body was immediately shattered, revealing her graceful and mesmerizing body. However, a black aura immediately surged out of her body and covered her. As if she had just been reborn, she let out a long breath and opened her eyes abruptly, releasing an indescribable pressure. The two souls had completely fused and obtained perfect control over their body. At this moment, Extermination had reached an unprecedented level of power. She was filled with confidence as she looked down at Ling Han. "Ling Han, your doomsday has arrived." Pun! Before she could finish her sentence, a heavy punch landed on her face and sent her flying. "Fuck you!" Ling Han caught up to her. "Did you think you're very impressive and awesome?" He hadn't unleashed his full battle prowess all this while, alright? Extermination's face was filled with disbelief. She had already fused the power and the souls of two beings, yet she was still no match for Ling Han? How was this possible? She was in a daze, and could not accept it at all. Pun! However, Ling Han's fist swung over again and directly sent her flying, letting her know that this was not a dream, but rather an incomparable reality. Pun pun pun, Ling Han's punches came upon her like rain, continuously crashing down. Extermination roared, and she channeled all of her heavenly venerable seals. An incomparably complex symbol shone on her forehead, and then she charged toward Ling Han to meet the attack. Pung! She was sent flying with a single strike. Even with a boost of 100,000 times in strength, she was still no match for Ling Han? No, her power didn't increase at all. How could such a thing happen? It was very simple. Why could the Heavenly Venerable Seals increase one's power? That was because the Heavenly Venerable Seals were a bridge that connected with fundamental power. The higher the level of the Heavenly Venerable Seals, the wider the bridge, and more fundamental power would surge over, resulting in greater boost of power. But now, the Genesis world was gone, and there was no more energy in the void. So what if Extermination channeled the Heavenly Venerable Seals? Where could she extract power from? When the well had dried up, what was the use of a bucket? Ping! Ling Han chased after Extermination, continuously unleashing fists of fury. This time, Extermination really didn't have any other methods. In the current situation, any secret technique would be useless. Only the one with greater power would win. And undoubtedly, not only was Ling Han's power stronger, his power was almost 10 times stronger, and not just stronger by a slight margin. There was not much improvement in their physiques, as they were still stuck in the so-called immortal and indestructible state of the 7th tier. No matter who struck whom, they could cause great damage to the other party. Right now, only Ling Han would be able to tyrannize extermination. Pu. Blood splattered everywhere. Extermination was in an extremely miserable state. Lin Luo and the others sighed. It seemed like everything was about to end. Ah! Extermination roared. She was indignant, and filled with resentment. She had already reached such a height, but she would still die. Why did Ling Han exist? You brought this upon yourself, Ling Han said coldly. Both yellow sand and extermination belonged to the Genesis worlds of the previous era. At that time, if extermination hadn't had the intention to dominate the Genesis world, why would she have been targeted by so many ultimate elites, and why would they have ended up risking the destruction of the Genesis world to kill her? Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand had also brought this upon himself. He had been reborn, and if he hadn't had such great ambitions, how could he have fallen to such a state? Therefore, he had brought this upon himself. He couldn't blame anyone. I can't accept this. I can't accept this. Extermination shouted as she fought back. She really couldn't accept this. Lin Luo and the others were extremely emotional. Although extermination hadn't been killed yet, the outcome had already been decided. The fiends that hounded the Genesis worlds of two eras were finally going to be executed, and could no longer stir up trouble. However, not only had the Genesis world collapsed this time, but even the void had been sucked dry. Could another third-generation Genesis world be born? Impossible. The only way out now was to open that door and enter a new world. If the new world was also nothingness, then they would live in this desolation forever. Hopefully, it wouldn't be this bad. The more Ling Han fought, the more violent he became. Extermination had to die as the Genesis world had been destroyed because of her, and countless lives had been lost. It would be unforgivable if she did not die after all that. Ling Han attacked wildly. So what if extermination's power could suppress that of a seventh tier? The injuries on her body were getting more and more severe, and she was not far from death. You forced me to do this, Extermination said in a resolute tone. Shio, the space between her brows split open, and a beam of light flew out, shooting straight towards Ling Han's forehead. This was her soul. She was very decisive. Since she was no match for Ling Han in terms of power, she would compete in divine sense. If her divine sense was superior, she would be able to dominate Ling Han's mind, and thus control Ling Han's body. This way, she could become the strongest through another method. However, this was too dangerous. Without the protection of the physical body, the soul would be extremely fragile. Once the soul was destroyed, one's divine sense would be destroyed as well. However, there was no way out for extermination, so she could only give it a try. Chapter 3089 3089 Bring Peace to the World. Chapter 3089 3089 Bring Peace to the World. 3089 Bring Peace to the World. Extermination's soul was very powerful, and it was now a fusion of two souls. The former Heavenly Venerate was even more incredible as he had fused with the souls of countless living beings in the Genesis world of the last era. Although more than 90% of the souls had been reduced to ashes by the destruction of the Genesis world at that time, even with only 1% left, it would still be indescribably powerful when fused into a person's body. Thus, extermination was confident enough that she could compete with Ling Han for control of the body, even if it was Ling Han's own body. Pun! With a heavy punch, extermination's spirit was instantly shattered, but these fragments all entered into Ling Han's body, converging towards his mind. With every piece, extermination's divine sense would become stronger. Upon reaching Ling Han's mind, she also transformed into her human form. Being shattered by Ling Han's fist was naturally a heavy blow to extermination's spirit. Right now, it was only left with less than 1% of its original strength, but this was already enough, far 10,000 times stronger than an ordinary 7th tier. On the outside, without the control of extermination's divine sense, her physical body naturally couldn't continue fighting any longer. It was blasted apart by only a single punch from Ling Han, and endless energy surged violently, transforming into billowing waves. Ling Han's body automatically absorbed this incomparably vigorous energy. Once he finished absorbing it, it would be equivalent to the energy of the entire void and the entire Genesis world converging onto his body. This was an endless power. However, Lin Luo and the others were all nervous. The divine sense of extermination had not been severed, and had even entered into Ling Han's body. If she controlled Ling Han's body, then all the good fortune would be obtained by her. Ling Han, you must hold on. You can't fall on this final step. Within the mind. Extermination strode forward, heading straight towards the core of Ling Han's mind. She wanted to find his spirit and kill him. This way, she could easily plunder Ling Han's physical body. Looking for me? Ling Han appeared, and his soul also transformed into a human form. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, not feeling the slightest bit of nervousness. Extermination looked at Ling Han, and revealed a cold smile. You're too conceited. Although your physical strength is invincible, when it comes to the strength of your soul, it's impossible for you to compare to me. You are destined to be killed by me, and your body will become my new body and head to a new world. And all of this has nothing to do with you. Ling Han shook his head and said, You talk too much nonsense, and are wasting my time. So, hurry up and disappear completely. He took the initiative to attack and threw a punch at extermination. If you fight me here, your own strength won't be of any use at all. Extermination cackled as she sent a palm strike towards Ling Han's direction. Pun! This attack was solid, but it didn't cause any waves. This was a clash of divine sense. However, extermination's expression changed drastically, and she was immediately sent flying. Her body was also torn apart, turning into countless fragments. Fortunately, this was a soul. Extermination's body quickly reassembled and returned to its original state, but it was obvious that she had shrunk. This attack was very damaging to her. How can your soul be stronger than mine? Her face was filled with disbelief. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, You've fused with many souls from the Genesis world of the last era, so you think you're very impressive and awesome, right? But you wouldn't have thought that the number of dimensions in my body now far exceeds the sum of the two Genesis worlds of these two eras combined. Moreover, they're all of the transcendent level, and have also developed living beings. Living beings will have willpower. When their willpower is combined, how could you be a match for them? Even if Extermination's soul hadn't been harmed, and she had fused with all the souls during the destruction of the Genesis world, she still wouldn't have been able to compare to Ling Han, let alone under such circumstances when she had had to bear with discounted power. If she could still be stronger than Ling Han, that would be unreasonable. Now get out of my body! Ling Han charged over and threw a punch. Ping! Extermination instantly retreated as her figure dimmed. She had suffered another serious injury. You deliberately let me invade your mind. This way, you can easily destroy my physical body and obtain all the energy. Extermination came to a sudden realization with the strength of Ling Han's divine sense. It was utterly impossible for her to invade his mind. Thus, Ling Han had intentionally screwed her over. Pun! 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 Under the continuous barrage of attacks, Extermination could only retreat step by step. In the end, she was blasted out of the mind, expelled from Ling Han's body, and transformed into a ball of flickering light. Now that her physical body had been destroyed, her remnant soul was like a rootless duckweed. Extermination was unwilling to die. She looked at Lin Luo and the others, wanting to plunder another body. You're deluding yourself, Ling Han said. He threw a punch, and ping, Extermination's soul was instantly shattered. Boom! A ripple spread through the entire void. The tyrant of an era had finally perished and completely disappeared from the world. It had to be admitted that Extermination was an incomparably powerful existence. Unfortunately, she had to stand against Ling Han. Lin Luo and the others were all watching. Right now, Ling Han was absorbing the boundless energy of Extermination. When Ling Han completed this step, he would possess the ability to pierce through this world. Now, the void was already dead, and it was impossible for the Genesis world to be reborn. They could only hope that Ling Han would open the door to a new world. Otherwise, although they would not die, they would feel even worse than death. Endless life, endless loneliness, and endless silence. 100,000 years later, Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes, and a majestic light flashed past like a thunderbolt. He casually moved his limbs, and a terrifying power instantly surged, as if the void couldn't withstand it, and was about to shatter. Ling Han! Lin Luo and the others said one after another. For an ultimate elite of 7th tier, 100,000 years of waiting was naturally not a big deal. There was an end to waiting like this. If Ling Han told them that he was unable to break through this heaven and earth, then even Lin Luo and the others would feel as if time was crawling and eventually go crazy under that boundless despair. Ling Han nodded, and looked at everyone. Now I have enough power to open that door and head to another new world, but I also don't know what the situation there is like. Everyone, are you going or staying? Unsurprisingly, Lin Luo and the others expressed that they were going. If they stayed here, so what if they had eternal life? This kind of loneliness was unbearable. Alright, then I'll open this door. Ling Han arrived at the place where the door of light had appeared earlier. He channeled all of his power, and threw a punch. Pun! The void trembled, and a passageway was forcefully formed. Everyone, let's go. Ling Han turned around, revealing a faint smile. Chapter 3090 3090 New World. Chapter 3090 3090 New World. 3090 New World. Lin Luo and the others nodded. I'll go first. Lin Luo stepped out, wanting to be the vanguard. This was actually very risky. Who knew what dangers lay outside? Perhaps there were as many 8th tiers as there were dogs. They could kill any 7th tier with a casual punch. If he walked out so rashly, what if he was slapped to death? Without waiting for Ling Han to stop him, Lin Luo took the lead. Ling Han knew that Lin Luo was intentionally testing the waters for him. If there was really any danger, then Ling Han could also make some preparations. However, although Lin Luo was the first to leave, it was difficult for him to take even a single step after entering that door. He had only taken 5 steps when he stopped. Then, that door of light, seemingly possessing incomparable elasticity, bounced Lin Luo back with a bang. To pass through this door, you need endless power, Lin Luo said with a bitter smile. He had originally wanted to test the waters for Ling Han, but he hadn't expected that he wouldn't be able to do even this. Bai Fan, Xi and Fu, and the others tried one by one, but they couldn't pass through. Opening the door required the energy of the entire void, so it would probably be the same if one wanted to transmigrate through it. Ling Han thought for a moment, and said, Everyone, you'd better enter the dimensions inside my body first. Otherwise, I'm worried that once we get out, this door will close, and I won't be able to open it again. Yes. Everyone nodded. Ling Han moved, and drew everyone into his body. In any case, he had already created transcendent dimensions that numbered in the millions, which was far more powerful than the Genesis world of the past, and was enough to bear the power of these 7th tiers. Now, he was the only one left in the vast void. He looked at the door of light, then looked behind him, and a resolute expression appeared on his face. He suddenly turned around and strode forward. 1. Ling Han entered the door of light, and an endless wave of resistance instantly assaulted him, wanting to push him back. No wonder Lin Luo and the others were unable to pass through this door. Such resistance was truly formidable. However, to Ling Han, who possessed the power of the entire void, this was still not an obstacle. Ling Han took large strides forward, and under the vigorous oscillation of his power, the power that could stop a 7th tier in his tracks seemed insignificant. He went deeper. Behind the door of light was a passageway that seemed to have a life of its own, squirming as it was. Boom! Behind him, the void was collapsing. The space he had been living in was about to disappear. Now, there was no turning back. He could only move forward. Ling Han walked faster and faster. His will was resolute, and since he had already made up his mind, he would not hesitate at all. Forward, forward, forward. He wanted to know if there was really a great world beyond this small puddle. The void behind him collapsed in large swathes, even affecting this passageway. The door of light shattered with a loud bang. Pun pun pun! The entire passageway began to collapse as well, and the destruction was rapidly spreading toward him. This speed was even faster than Ling Han could walk forwards. Fuck! Ling Han did not know how powerful the destructive power of this collapse was. Perhaps it could even injure his physical body? Therefore, it was best that he did not let it catch up to him. He sped up, becoming as fast as lightning. However, after running for almost an hour, Ling Han suddenly discovered that there was no path ahead. It was a dead end? Ling Han roared furiously, and raised his fist. All of his power condensed, and blasted forward. Bang! How powerful was he? With a furious blast, the area in front of him instantly shattered. No matter what it was. A burst of light struck him, catching him off guard, and causing him to immediately close his eyes. Ping! He fell to the ground. Ha ha! The divine stone has come into being! The divine stone has come into being! A voice rang out beside Ling Han, carrying an incomparably pleasant surprise. Ling Han was stunned at first, and then a strange feeling rose in his heart. He clearly didn't understand the other party's language, so why did he understand what this person meant? He wanted to get up, but he realized that he was extremely weak. He didn't even have the strength to get up. This surprised Ling Han, and he even felt a trace of fear. He had fused with the power of the entire void. How powerful was he? But now he couldn't even stand up? Ling Han tried his best to open his eyes, and turned to look. He saw an old man walking towards him. He was short, and had messy hair, and his face was filled with excitement, and a crazy smile. At this moment, Ling Han felt incomparably weak, as if he were an ordinary person, or even more inferior to an ordinary person. His first reaction was to release Lin Luo and the others from his body. He didn't know why he was exhausted, but Lin Luo and the others were at the 7th tier, which was enough to ensure his safety. However, he immediately realized that he couldn't release them at all. What happened? What happened? The old man had already come over and flipped Ling Han over, his eyes sizing him up. The divine stone shattered on its own, and the divine sun appeared, descending upon my ancient Tao sect. This is a Tao child bestowed by the heavens, indicating that my sect will rise in the upcoming great era. What was this old man talking about? What divine stone and divine sun? Was he talking about him? Don't move! Don't move! The old man pressed down on Ling Han. His power was so great that Ling Han couldn't move at all. You've just been born, and you've exhausted all your power. You're currently extremely weak. Do you understand what I'm saying? The old geezer looked at Ling Han with great anticipation. Ling Han finally turned over and looked behind him. There were many stone fragments there, and one of them was extremely huge. Based on his inference, this had originally been a massive rock that was close to a spherical shape. Now, the stone had shattered, but the stone fragments below it were still there. Combined with the old man's words, Ling Han had a guess in his heart. Did he break out of this stone just now? Was this even possible? The Genesis world and the endless void were actually inside this stone. Ling Han was so shocked that he was speechless. No wonder Extermination and Hysteria had always said that they lived in a small puddle. In terms of size, this was actually not even comparable to a small puddle. He nodded at the old man. I can understand. You can understand me, but I can't understand your words, the old geezer said. I'm really curious. 30 years ago, Lord Sect Master brought the Divine Stone back, and said that according to ancient records, it would give birth to a Supreme Spirit embryo. It's been more than 30 years. I've finally completed my wait. The old geezer was very excited, as if he had found a huge treasure. Ling Han's mind was filled with thoughts of disbelief. He had worked hard all the way in the Genesis world and fought until he was the strongest, but he had actually only managed to snatch the right to be born. Where was his supreme power? Ling Han was dejected, and his mind was blank. This was like a person who had become a billionaire through hard work, but suddenly, for no reason at all, he had turned into a poor beggar. How could such a disparity in status be easily accepted? He didn't even realize how he was carried away, and then placed inside a room. After that, he was in a daze. It seemed that many people were coming in and out, saying something, but it was too far away for him to hear a word. However, only 2 days later, Ling Han pulled himself together. As long as his people were still around, he could start all over again. Moreover, there were countless people living in the dimensions in his body, and there was too much responsibility on his shoulders. He had to pull himself together. Chapter 3091 Summoned by the Sect Master. Chapter 3091 Summoned by the Sect Master. 3091 Summoned by the Sect Master. Ling Han got up. He realized that he was already wearing a coarse linen shirt, and he wondered who had changed his clothes for him. He slowly stepped on the ground. With his feet on the ground, he wanted to stand up, but he almost fell to the ground. Fuck, this feeling of powerlessness simply made one want to die. Ling Han was depressed. In the past, he had been so awesome that he had swept through countless ferocious beings, easily destroying heavenly bodies and devouring the heavens, but now he actually didn't even have the strength to stand up. This was too depressing. "Young master, you're awake?" A woman's voice sounded. Ling Han turned his head to look. This was a maid in green clothes. She looked quite sweet, and could just barely be considered a beauty. He asked, "Who are you?" "Young master, I don't understand what you're saying," the maid in green said. However, she was quite smart. She quickly nodded and said, "This servant is called Huan Shui. I'm here to serve young master." Ling Han nodded, and gestured at Huan Shui, meaning for her to teach him how to speak. He could understand the other party's words, so learning how to speak was actually very simple. In just half a day's time, Ling Han had mostly mastered the language of this world. Gee! The door was pushed open, and sunlight shone down. A tall man appeared at the door, but because the sunlight was too dazzling, his face couldn't be seen. One could only tell that he was an extremely tall man. "Greetings, young Master Li." Huan Shui hurriedly bowed. Only then did the man walk in, and his appearance could be seen clearly. This was a young man in his early 20s. He was very handsome, and every move he made gave off a feeling of power. "My name is Li Changdan." The young man smiled, appearing very cultured and refined. "After resting for 2 days, you can finally get up. This is really good news." He seemed to be very concerned about Ling Han, but Ling Han had experienced many great storms, and was able to see through the other's deception with a single glance, seeing the contempt and hostility hidden in the depths of the other's eyes. What a hypocrite! Ling Han said this in his heart. He deliberately pretended not to understand, and spouted nonsense. In any case, the other party did not understand either. Li Changnan left after sitting for a while. He was all smiles, as if he didn't mind at all. "Who is this guy?" Ling Han asked Huan Shui. Huan Shui immediately revealed a look of admiration. "Young Master Li is the most outstanding disciple of our ancient Tao sect. You don't know, but young Master Li is only 21 years old now, but he has already opened 9 meridians. His strength is shocking." Opening his meridians? Ling Han had the urge to laugh out loud. This sounded like only the initial stage of cultivation, yet it could actually be called shocking strength. However, he immediately sighed. He could barely even stand. In comparison, he could only be considered a baby. That made sense. He had just been born from the divine stone. If he wasn't a baby, then what was he? However, judging from his size, he was already a supergiant baby. What kind of place is this? Ling Han was curious. What kind of world had he entered? Huan Shui was only a maid, so she didn't know much. She told Ling Han everything she knew in detail. This was the ancient Tao sect, a place to cultivate martial arts. The sect master's name was Sun Jianfang, and it was said that he was already more than 100 years old. He was the first batch of people to stand out after the upheavals of heaven and earth. Now, he had also become a regional elite, looking down on the world. In this era, everyone yearned to cultivate and obtain strength, but the path of cultivation was too difficult. For example, Huan Shui didn't have any natural talent in cultivation, so she could only be a maid and rely on the protection of the ancient Tao sect. Why? After the drastic changes in heaven and earth, the wild beasts that could only be prey in the past suddenly began to evolve violently, occupying a large number of territories that had belonged to humans, causing humans that had once been the most intelligent life form to become prey. A small number of people were lucky enough to enter the territory overseen by elites. Those who were even luckier were able to be taken in as disciples by elites and walk on the path of cultivation. Those who were not so lucky, such as Huan Shui, could only be reduced to a servant. However, this was all that Huan Shui knew. She had been in the ancient Tao sect since she had been born, and had never left the mountain in all her 19 years of life. Therefore, her knowledge was limited. Ling Han had to ask someone else. Fortunately, only a day later, Ling Han was summoned by the sect master of the ancient Tao sect. "Young master, when you meet Lord Sect Master, you must maintain a humble attitude," Huan Shui advised Ling Han. "Lord Sect Master can decide the life and death of everyone. If you accidentally anger Lord Sect Master, there is no need to kill you. You only have to be thrown down the mountain, and you will be eaten by wild beasts." Ling Han smiled. Although this maidservant was inexperienced and not very knowledgeable, she had a good heart. "I got it." Over the past few days, his strength had been increasing at every moment. At the very least, walking was no longer a problem. He soon arrived at Sect Master Sun Jianfeng's courtyard. After knocking on the door, he was led in by a servant boy. The courtyard was very large, and a white-haired old man was drinking tea in the garden. Hearing the sound of him entering, he turned around and looked towards Ling Han. It was an old man in his 70s. He put down his teacup and smiled. "Come here." "Sun Jianfeng?" According to Huan Shui, this old man was already more than 100 years old. It seemed that he had taken good care of himself. Ling Han walked over as he was told. His current strength was close to zero, and although the person in front of him was very old, it was like there was a ferocious tiger hidden in his body. To speak of fighting one of him, even if there were 10 of him, it would not be a problem. Therefore, it was better to go along with this old geezer for the time being. Ling Han walked over and said, "I have many questions." Sun Jianfeng raised his white brows. "That's right. It's only been 4 days, but you've already learned our language. As expected of a divine son born of the heavens." Ling Han said, "I don't understand. More than 30 years ago, I entered an ancient site to search for opportunities, but it was too dangerous. I spent a lot of effort and almost died, but I only obtained a stone and a notebook. This is the notebook of a great elite from ancient times. He was once incomparably powerful. He said that this stone was also obtained by him during an adventure. Its origins might be incomparably great. Therefore, he called it the Divine Stone. He believed that it contained some kind of power of the heaven and earth. One day, it would nurture a living being that would reach an unprecedented height of power. 3 years ago, there was a commotion from the Divine Stone. I thought that the Divine Son was about to be born. I didn't expect that the time was still not ripe. After a while, the Divine Stone stopped. It's all right. However, after waiting for another 3 years, you still came out." Sun Jianfeng stopped and took a sip of tea. Ling Han was shocked. The Divine Stones had gone berserk 3 years ago? According to extermination, 3,000 epochs ago, the first-generation Genesis world had been destroyed. In theory, it would only be the collapse of the Genesis world that could cause the Divine Stone to riot. Otherwise, with the void so big and the energy storms, how could it alarm the Divine Stone? But 3 years ago? Chapter 3092 General Situation. Chapter 3092 General Situation. 3092 General Situation. Ling Han's heart trembled violently. He finally understood why the Genesis world was called a small puddle. Not only was it small, but the flow of time was also wrong. One day in the heavens was equivalent to 1 year on the mortal plane. And it was not just a year here. A year had passed here, but 1,000 epochs had passed in the Genesis world. Ling Han sought guidance from Sun Jianfang. He was truly filled with unanswered questions about this world. Sun Jianfang didn't hide anything. Just because Huan Shui didn't know some things, it didn't mean that it was a secret. Actually, 123 years ago, this world had still been very ordinary. Humans had only been humans, and there hadn't been any powerful cultivators. There had indeed been martial artists, but they only strengthened their bodies, and had been better at fighting than ordinary people. They hadn't been much stronger. Wild beasts had only been ferocious. For example, tigers and lions could have been resisted or even in fact killed by a dozen people with blades and spears. After the invention of firearms, even a completely weak person could kill ferocious lions, tigers, and black bears. However, 123 years ago, there had been a huge turn of events. On a certain day in that year, there was no way to verify the exact date. Some kind of great change had occurred in heaven and earth, and wild beasts had mutated. They had begun to evolve rapidly and become incomparably powerful. In fact, firearms were useless against them. Humans had almost been exterminated overnight. Not only had ferocious beasts become stronger, but they also possessed astonishing intelligence. They occupied a large number of territories that had originally belonged to humans, and treated humans as food. The status of both sides seemed to have completely been flipped upside down. However, the ground was also changing, revealing some ancient buildings buried deep underground. There were even ancient cultivation secret techniques inside. Some of the people who found these ancient buildings quickly rose to power, and gained the strength to fight against mutated beasts. Only then did humans truly obtain a chance to breathe. These cultivators created places like the ancient Tao Sect to protect a region. This old man wishes to appoint you as the Tao child, but although you've been born from the divine stone, you haven't displayed any freakish abilities yet. If I directly appointed you as the Tao child, it would not be legitimate or appropriate. After Sun Jianfang finished explaining the matters of this world, he began to talk about Ling Han. Therefore, I'll give you a mission. Within 3 years, open 12 meridians and reach the pinnacle of meridian opening. Ling Han was not interested in becoming this so-called Tao child, but it seemed that his powerful strength could only be used in the small world of the divine stone. Once he left that place, he would become an ordinary person. This indeed made Ling Han a little depressed, even a little defiant. He even had the urge to go back and become an ultimate elite of the 7th tier. But firstly, the divine stone had already been destroyed, and it was impossible for him to return. Secondly, since someone like him had a vaster heaven and earth to conquer, how could he possibly retreat? He had to advance courageously. Otherwise, the Empress, Lin Luo, and the others would be trapped in the dimensions within his body forever. From this point of view, Ling Han was definitely different from the rest. This also gave Ling Han great confidence. Sect Master, I still want to ask about cultivation. Ling Han sought advice from Sun Jianfang, but he received very little information. 100 years ago, there was no true cultivation in this world, and it was just a show of fancy moves. No matter how high one's martial prowess was, they would not be able to withstand a blow from a firearm. In the last 100 years, cultivation had blossomed, and elites could even withstand bullets head-on. However, not many people could explain the nature of cultivation. There was a widespread saying that the ability they obtained now was not traditional martial arts, but cultivation. If one continued cultivating like this until the end, he would become a celestial, as the legends speak of. He would be able to fly in the sky and burrow into the ground, and he would be omnipotent. However, because there was no inheritance, everything could only be explored by oneself. There was no way to know if it was right or wrong. The reason why the ancient Tao sect could rise to prominence, or rather, why Sun Jianfang could become an elite of a region, was because of a fist manual. This fist manual had also become the ancient Tao sect's top secret and supreme precious treasure. Even an outstanding disciple like Li Changdan had only been taught one move, and the elders had only learned 3 to 5 moves from it. Ling Han hadn't even learned a single move, and Sun Jianfang had indeed taught him a set of fist techniques. However, it wasn't the ultimate technique of the sect, but a simplified version of the 4 directional fists, and its power couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as the original version. When Ling Han returned to his residence, a fist manual was in his hands. This was a simplified version of the 4 directional fists. Even so, this was still something that countless people would fight over. Here, cultivation has just begun. Everything seems to be shrouded in a fog. I have to slowly explore on my own. Take Li Changdan for example. He opened up the 9 meridians in his body, and each meridian is filled with power. With a punch, powerful power surged out of all 9 meridians. The power of his punch is terrifying and can shatter rocks. Just being able to shatter rocks, and that can be called an elite? Ling Han sighed. He couldn't think about the past anymore. That wasn't even a real world. If he were to be placed here with his terrifying power, even walking was difficult. He had to let go of his past glory, treat himself as the most ordinary person, and start over. In fact, he had no choice but to think that way. He was just an ordinary person now. The first step of cultivation is to open up the meridians, but first, you have to know where the meridians are. Ling Han smiled bitterly. Previously, he had been able to look inside himself, and everything was not a big deal. But now, people with high natural talent in cultivation can use fist techniques, palm techniques, and other techniques to trigger a surge of power, and naturally open up their meridians. However, if I don't have such powerful natural talent, I can only settle for the next best thing. The first is the Meridian guiding fruit. After consuming it, there's a high chance of sensing the meridians in the body and guiding the power through them. Secondly, the effect of refining the Meridian guiding fruit into a Meridian guiding pill is much stronger than the Meridian guiding fruit. However, very few people know how to refine pills. Every Meridian guiding pill is priceless. Only fist techniques can be cultivated? Ling Han found it strange. On his cultivation path in the past, besides martial arts techniques, there were also cultivation techniques. Cultivation techniques were the key to increasing one's power. Were there no cultivation techniques here? The Meridian guiding fruit only appeared after the upheaval of heaven and earth. Now, it's basically in the territory of those ferocious beasts. Occasionally, we can pluck it in the wild, but the chances are pitifully low. Wild beasts have developed intelligence. They can no longer be called wild beasts, but rather demonic beasts. This is very similar to the Genesis world. The ancient Tao sect also has Meridian guiding fruits, but there are pitifully few of them. They can only be obtained when one has achieved extraordinary contributions for the sect. There are 12 meridians in the human body. In order to cultivate to the peak of meridian opening, you have to open these meridians. In other words, with every step you take, you need at least 1 meridian guiding fruit. There are so many people in the ancient Tao sect. There is not enough to go around. I'll practice this fist technique first, and see if I'm that kind of cultivation prodigy. Chapter 3093 Training Fist Technique. Chapter 3093 Training Fist Technique. 3093 Training Fist Technique. Ancient Tao Sect, Li Changdan's courtyard. Senior Brotherly, something bad has happened. I heard that Lord Sect Master intends to make Ling Han the Tao child. A young man hurried in, his face full of anger. Li Changdan was practicing his fist technique, but there was no change in his expression when he heard this. He continued to practice his punches, and said calmly, "Don't panic. The sky hasn't collapsed yet." "Why hasn't it collapsed yet?" the young man said anxiously, and started to panic. "Senior Brotherly, you should be the Tao child of our sect, to continue the legacy of Lord Sect Master and travel the world to establish our reputation on behalf of our sect. Who does that Ling Han think he is? He is just an orphan that popped out from a rock. It is unknown if he's even human. How can such a person be our Tao child? Senior brotherly, you started practicing martial arts at the age of 11. Now that you're 21 years old, you've already opened 9 meridians in your body. Even senior brothers who are much older than you usually only open 6 meridians. Once you open another meridian, you can even become an elder of the sect. That Ling Han can't be compared to you even if he tries with all his might. If he is to become the Tao child, I'll be the first to disagree. The young man spoke angrily, as if it was his position as the Tao child that Ling Han had stolen. Li Changnan was still as calm as ever. As he swung his fist, a vigorous aura emanated from him, opening up 9 meridians. Whether it was in the ancient Tao sect or anywhere else, he was qualified to be called an elite. Tong Feng, this is just a rumor. Besides, even Lord Sect Master can't ignore everyone's objections and rashly make someone the Tao child, he said indifferently. The young man's surname was Zhang, and his full name was Jing Tong Feng. He was a year younger than Li Changdan, and had opened 4 meridians. His aptitude could only be said to be average. He looked at Li Changdan, and gradually calmed down. But senior brotherly, everyone's saying that if we let him do as he pleases, he might really be able to do as he wishes in the future. He was still worried. Li Changdan smiled. Don't worry, there's still a long time. To be the Tao child, he would naturally have to be able to withstand the trial. You can't be a person with bad character. Senior brotherly, you mean? Realization dawned on Jing Tongfeng, and his words trailed off. If one wanted to become the Tao child, not only did he have to have natural talent in martial arts, but he also had to pass the test of morals. However, if Ling Han did something wrong, would he still have the qualifications to become the Tao child? He. Li Changnan continued to punch. He had to open the 10th meridian as soon as possible so that he could truly gain a foothold in this great world. Otherwise, he would only be a small fry. As for Ling Han? Humph! Ling Han first flipped through the fist manual. Although his current strength had fallen to rock bottom, his comprehension ability had not changed in the slightest. He had only flipped through the fist manual once, and he already understood it completely. It's a pity that the martial arts I've mastered before can't be applied at all, or else I won't have to cultivate such rudimentary knowledge, Ling Han muttered. Although this was an extremely superficial fist technique, it was in accordance with certain regulations of this world. After practicing it, one could strengthen their body and possess the power to shatter rocks and break pillars. Ling Han began to practice in the courtyard. With this training, he immediately realized that he had been biting off more than he could chew. Understanding was one thing, but being able to do it was another. This fist technique was very artful, and required one's body to be twisted. Many of the moves violated the human body's structure. If one forcefully twisted his body, not only would it hurt, but some angles would also be impossible to achieve. In the past, that would not have been a big deal for Ling Han, as his body could have been twisted at will. Now, however, he was just an ordinary person. If he forcefully twisted his body, the result would be him breaking his own bones. I have to cultivate the toughness of my body first. Otherwise, I can't cultivate this fist technique, Ling Han said to himself. He began to train his toughness. Pressing on his legs and bending his waist, he began the basic training. When it came to practicing martial arts, Ling Han had always been very crazy. In order to start as soon as possible, he tormented himself as if his life depended on it. If someone else were to press down on his legs, it would be enough if he could do a split. Ling Han, however, almost bent his legs to the side of his ears. If he wanted to do it, he had to do it to the best of his ability. Fortunately, toughness was very easy to cultivate. After merely 2 days, Ling Han once again began to cultivate his fist technique. After one round, Ling Han frowned. There were too many imperfections. Again. He corrected his mistakes over and over again until he was exhausted. After resting for a night, Ling Han continued. In terms of strengthening his foundations, he was a person who pursued perfection, almost to the point of being a maniac. He even got Huan Shui to get him a mirror and then told her to leave. He stripped down to his underpants and practiced punching in front of the mirror, picking out all of his subtle flaws. Under such crazy demands, he would completely master this fist technique in another day. It was as if he had practiced it for more than 10 years without any slacking off. The sun had already set, but Ling Han did not stop. Since he had already mastered the fist technique, it was even more important for him to open his first meridian and restart his path of cultivation. However, he couldn't sense anything even after practicing dozens of times. If he could not feel the existence of his meridians, how could he open them? Could it be that I'm not suitable to practice martial arts here? Ling Han stopped, appearing rather puzzled. He didn't know where the divine stone came from, but he knew what was inside. The prerequisite for him to walk out was that he had absorbed all the power there. How could that divine stone be ordinary? Therefore, he had to be a prodigy. I need the meridian guiding fruit to open the path of martial arts? Ling Han frowned. It's late now. I'll have a good rest and practice again tomorrow. The next morning, before the sun rose, Ling Han began to practice his fist techniques. However, just like last night, he still did not sense any meridians. I don't believe it! Ling Han continued to practice his fist techniques. He was a stubborn person, and had once been in existence above the 7th tier. His willpower was like iron, so how could he easily give up? A golden light appeared on the horizon. The sun was about to come out. Huh! Ling Han was suddenly startled. He realized that he had absorbed a faint trace of power, and it was slowly traversing his body. This power rose from the bottom of his left foot, and spread all the way to his left side of his abdomen, then up the left side of his chest, past his neck, and stopped under his left eye. I sensed it? He stopped, and this power immediately disappeared. However, Ling Han had a feeling that his body seemed to have become slightly stronger. This was very weak, but Ling Han's divine sense was extremely sharp. He could conclude that this was definitely not his imagination. This was very unbelievable. Not only did he discover the meridians, but he also directly guided the power to circulate in them. According to Sun Jianfang, there were a total of 12 meridians in the human body. They were known as the 12 main meridians, and there were diagrams showing the circulation of power. However, since there was a diagram, why were so many people still unable to open the path of cultivation? That was because the meridians were not blood vessels or bones. Even if someone was cut open, they would not be able to see or touch them. The diagram only meant that the meridians were nearby, but one still needed to sense and explore them himself. Chapter 3094 3094 Prodigy. Chapter 3094 3094 Prodigy. 3094 Prodigy. Let's not worry about this for now. Since I can sense my meridians, I'll cultivate first. Ling Han was very big-hearted. He laid down the doubts in his heart and focused on punching. More power surged into his body and circulated in his meridians. This meridian was very sluggish, as if it contained many impurities. However, every time power surged through it, it was as if a plow had been used to clear it. Ling Han discovered that his meridian was actually so small and filled with impurities. Under the repeated clearing, many impurities were brought out, and his meridian was also slowly becoming wider. Suddenly, he realized that there was no longer any power surging into his body. No matter how he punched, he couldn't enter this state again. What's the reason? It's so dirty. He realized that there was a layer of black substance on his hands, and there was even a fishy smell. When he looked again, it wasn't just his hands. His arms, thighs, and entire body were like this. Could it be that these are the impurities that were cleared out from the meridian? Ling Han suddenly came to a realization. That must be it. He quickly went to take a shower. This world was very strange. There was no need to fetch water. It was connected to the room through an iron pipe. As long as the switch was turned, water would flow out. In fact, one could even choose whether it was hot water or cold water. Ling Han took a shower and washed off all the dirt on his body. Rumble! His stomach growled. So hungry! Ling Han was astounded. Ever since he had reached accomplishments in cultivation, he had lost his sense of hunger. But not only was he hungry now, he even felt as if he was so hungry that he could swallow an entire cow. He called Huan Shui over and asked her to prepare some food. After eating, Ling Han continued to practice his fist techniques. However, to his disappointment, no more wisps of power surged into his body. From morning to noon, and then to night, Ling Han did not stop. He practiced for another night, and only stopped when he was truly exhausted. If it had been yesterday, he definitely wouldn't have been able to last that long. However, after absorbing that wisp of power this morning, his physique seemed to have become much stronger, allowing him to persevere. Of course, it wouldn't work if it took too long, but it shouldn't be a problem for just one day and one night. The night passed, and light appeared again in the east. The moment the sun jumped out, that power came again. Slivers of coolness surged into Ling Han's body, and there was an indescribable sense of comfort. Could it be that it's because of the sun? Ling Han thought. When it was dawn, there might be some kind of special resonance, but when the sun had risen completely, this resonance would disappear. Sure enough, after a while, the power stopped surging over. Ling Han stopped. There was no point in continuing to train. He would only feel fatigue, and it would be a complete waste of time. According to the Meridian diagram, the one I'm opening now is the Ziyang Bright Gastric Meridian. Practicing the fist technique is only effective during the early morning hours. It means I can't sleep in anymore. I'll go and take a shower. Although he could only cultivate for a short while, Ling Han's body was once again stained with filth, and it was simply insufferably smelly. This world is a little like the mechanical dimension in the Genesis world. It's mainly focused on technology. However, there was a turning point in history more than 100 years ago. Martial arts flourished, and technology was ruthlessly crushed by martial arts. However, although technology doesn't have the upper hand when it comes to fighting, technology brings a lot of convenience in daily life. Ling Han looked at the clock hanging on the wall. It was said that this had been an ordinary item before the upheaval of the world, but now that a large number of factories had been turned into ruins, this kind of thing was very rare, and there was no repairing it if it broke. A night passed, and Ling Han woke up early to practice his fist techniques in the courtyard. The entire process only took about half an hour, and if it was any longer, there wouldn't be any effect. He could only improve his proficiency of the fist technique. Just as he finished his breakfast, he was summoned by Sun Jianfang. "Greetings, Sect Master." Ling Han bowed respectfully. No matter how high he had stood before, he was now an ordinary person. He had just opened a meridian in his body, and could barely be considered to have embarked on the path of cultivation. Sun Jianfang nodded and asked, "Have you studied the fist manual I gave you a few days ago?" "I did," Ling Han answered honestly. "If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask," Sun Jianfang said. He paused for a moment, and said smilingly, "I gave you the time of these few days because I wanted you to ask all the questions you've accumulated so that you wouldn't waste time going back and forth." "Oh, I see." Ling Han shook his head and said, "There's nothing I don't understand. I've learned everything." Sun Jianfang was about to drink his tea, but upon hearing this, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of displeasure. He put down the teacup and said, "If you know, you know. If you don't know, you don't know. This old man hates people who act like they understand when they don't the most." The corners of Ling Han's mouth twitched. There was really nothing he didn't understand. Could it be that he wanted him to pretend to be stupid? "There's indeed nothing I don't understand," Ling Han said. Sun Jianfang almost kicked him, but after thinking about it, he forcefully suppressed this urge and said, "All right, since you're so confident, demonstrate it to me." "All right." Ling Han nodded, and immediately assumed his stance, starting to practice. Every move was perfect. Sun Jianfang was flabbergasted, looking as if he had seen a ghost. He had already overestimated Ling Han. That was why he had summoned Ling Han today to give him some pointers. In his opinion, Ling Han should have practiced 1/3 of the fist technique at most in just these few days, and he would definitely have a lot of questions. This was already a very high estimate of Ling Han. After all, the latter was a divine son, and could not be measured by the standards of ordinary people. But now, not only had Ling Han mastered the entire set of fist techniques, but he had also not made the slightest mistake. It was so perfect that even Sun Jianfang could not help but want to applaud. Fuck, this is too exaggerated. Was the divine son that impressive? A prodigy? No, a super genius. He was so excited that he wanted to praise Ling Han. With such a successor in the ancient Tao sect, they would definitely have the upper hand in the glorious future, and stand proudly. But when he thought about it again, he shook his head inwardly. No, this kid was already proud enough. If he praised him again, wouldn't he be so puffed up that he would simply soar into the skies? Sun Jianfang nodded slowly and said, "In the end, you didn't disappoint me. This is a little like it." With that, his face burned. Would he be struck by lightning for lying and going against his conscience? Ling Han retracted his hands, and only smiled slightly. He didn't point it out either. He had to leave some face for the other party. After all, the other party was an elder and an elite. As for Ling Han? Going by the flow of time here, he wasn't even half a year old. He should give the other party some face. Since you no longer have any problems with your fist techniques, I'll tell you about the Meridians, Sun Jianfang said. He sighed in his heart. According to his original plan, this should only be discussed a month later. The path of cultivation is long, and we have just come into contact with this domain. Our knowledge is extremely limited. Chapter 3095 Meridian Guiding Fruit. Chapter 3095 Meridian Guiding Fruit. 3095 Meridian Guiding Fruit. The celestial path is long, and its length is unknown. The difficulty of walking this path is unknown, Sun Jianfang said. Ling Han didn't say anything, and only listened. The first step of cultivation is to use techniques to communicate with heaven and earth and extract the power of heaven and earth. Sun Jianfang finally said something useful, confirming Ling Han's conjecture that he could only cultivate for half an hour in the morning. The human body has a total of 12 true meridians. Opening them can fill one with power, allowing an ordinary person to have the ability to shatter rocks and crack pillars. In fact, according to ancient tales, there were great elites who could overturn rivers and seas. They were peerless. However, the first step is not to open the meridians, but to sense them first. Sun Jianfang paused for a moment, looked at Ling Han, and said, "Although the meridians of the human body are all marked in the diagram, this only tells you roughly where they are, and how you can sense them, but it still depends on you. Here, this is the meridian guiding fruit." He threw a crimson fruit at Ling Han, and a faint fragrance wafted out. After the drastic change in heaven and earth, there were many earthquakes, and many ancient buildings appeared. There were even mountains rising from the ground. Not only did they have inheritances, but they also had this kind of mysterious fruit. Consume it, and it can greatly increase the probability of you sensing your meridians. Ling Han accepted the meridian guiding fruit, and a strange expression appeared on his face. Should he tell the other party that he had already sensed one of his meridians and had experienced some success? Don't underestimate this fruit. Our sect only has one meridian guiding fruit tree. It can only bear 10 fruits every year, but there are too many people who need it. Sun Jianfang said solemnly. If this fruit is sold outside, it's worth at least 100 jade seeds. Jade seed? Ling Han heard another new term, and was extremely curious. The jade seed is the essence of jade. It contains some kind of energy of the heaven and earth. If you activate it with a spirit-gathering formation, you can release the energy inside. Then, you will be able to cultivate and strengthen yourself at any time, Sun Jianfang said. Ling Han nodded with an O. This was equivalent to spirit stones, right? It was just that one could cultivate with spirit stones directly, while cultivation with the jade seed could only be done through formations. Ling Han nodded and put away the meridian guiding fruit. He did not need it, but he could sell it. Besides, he still wanted to restart his path of alchemy. If he could refine the Meridian guiding fruit into a Meridian guiding pill, wouldn't he become rich? Go! Sun Jianfang waved his hand. I'll give you 10 days. Then I'll check if you've sensed your meridians. Yes. Ling Han bowed, then left. Sun Jianfang stroked his beard and hesitated slightly. Should he relax his deadline of 10 days? This was because the fastest person to sense their meridians in the ancient Dao sect had still required 29 days. 10 days? He saw that Ling Han had grasped the 4-directional fist so quickly, which was why he had changed the deadline at the last minute. Forget it, 10 days it was. When that time came, this brat would not succeed, and it would be a good opportunity to suppress his arrogance. This would only be beneficial to Ling Han. Ling Han returned to his room, and decided to learn more about alchemy. He asked Huan Shui where books on alchemy were. Books? Huan Shui scratched her head, and revealed a troubled expression. After the upheaval, the world suffered huge destruction. A place like the library was the first to turn into ruins, because it was not protected by a large number of soldiers. Ling Han sighed. Was his luck that bad? However, if young master only wants to look up information, you can use the optical computer, Huan Shui suddenly said. What optical computer? Ling Han was confused. Young master, have you never used an optical computer in your study before? Huan Shui was even more confused. Ling Han shrugged. He had no idea what an optical computer was. It's all my fault. Huan Shui blamed herself. I forgot that young master came out of a rock. How could he know about the things in our world? She was taking things for granted too much. Everyone in this world knew about the optical computer. Perhaps even a 3-year-old child could play with it. Thus, she naturally thought that Ling Han should also know about it. Come, young master, I'll teach you. The two of them arrived at the study, and Huan Shui began to teach Ling Han how to use the optical computer. This was a small box-like object with a button on it. With a press, a ray of light shot out, and transformed into the form of a young girl. An image projection? Due to habit, Ling Han used what he already knew to explain this. This move was often used by Wally. His eyes shone, and he would be able to project any scene, which would look very genuine and realistic. I'm your assistant. May I ask what you need me to do? The girl asked. Young master, you can ask her anything, Huan Shui said. This was indeed something that even a 3-year-old could play with. Ling Han nodded and asked, How many pill recipes do you know? 109, the girl replied. Show me. Understood. The projection girl disappeared with a bang. Then countless specks of light condensed into words and images. Purple essence pill, which can heal injuries. The ingredients needed are purple heart fruit, origin intent grass, the shell of a 100-year-old turtle. Refinement conditions, heavenly unity formation, midnight? Ling Han read, and couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. Refining pills had requirements regarding time and formations? It was really different. Ling Han said directly. Show me the pill recipe for the Meridian guiding pill. Yes, the optical computer said. The words and pictures immediately shattered, and then the light reassembled to form new words and images. The Meridian guiding pill can help you sense your meridians. The ingredients needed are the Meridian guiding fruit. Only the Meridian guiding fruit is needed? Refinement requirements, 3 elements formation. There's no time restriction. Ling Han then said. Show me the specific information of the 3 elements formation. Yes. The optical computer then showed him the formation. This was a 3-dimensional diagram, and every detail could be enlarged. It was really useful. It was equivalent to bringing a Wally with him. Ling Han couldn't help but miss that guy. With the information of this world, coupled with Wally's ability to analyze and deduce, the two of them would definitely have a happy working relationship. Forget it, I can't let Wally out now. I have to rely on myself. Ling Han began to study the 3 elements formation. Actually, setting up this formation was not difficult, but one needed to find suitable terrain. The formation actually used the terrain to draw out the energy contained in the ground and turn it into the flames needed for alchemy. However, there were two conditions for setting up formations. The first was the foundations of the formation, and the second was the jade seeds. The foundation of the formation was the basics of the formations, and it was the key to triggering the energy of the terrain. Meanwhile, the jade seed would provide the energy that was initially needed to activate the formation. The difficulty now is, firstly, the production of the formation foundations. Secondly, the jade seeds. I'm poor now. Other than a meridian guiding fruit, I don't have any assets. How am I supposed to get the formation foundations and the jade seed? The formation foundations were still alright. Even ordinary stones could be used. It was just that they were not durable. Perhaps they would be destroyed halfway through the refinement process, but the jade seeds were real money. Where can I get the money? Chapter 3096 3096 Going Out to Play. Chapter 3096 3096 Going Out to Play. 3096 Going Out to Play. Senior Brother Li! Xing Tongfeng appeared in Li Changdan's courtyard again. What's wrong now? Li Changdan, who was drinking tea, looked at Xing Tongfeng. Xing Tongfeng appeared to be very angry and said, I just heard that Lord Sect Master bestowed a meridian guiding fruit on Ling Han. Huh! This time, Li Changdan couldn't remain calm anymore. He put down his teacup, and his sharp brows couldn't help but furrow. The position of Dao Child couldn't be randomly conferred. Even if Sun Jianfang was the sect master, he couldn't disregard the objections of the elders and randomly choose someone. In the eyes of the elders, Li Changdan was the most suitable candidate for the position of Dao Child. Thus, he was not in a hurry on this point. He had plenty of time to deal with Ling Han. However, the meridian guiding fruit? The ancient Dao sect could only produce 10 meridian guiding fruits every year. Not only did the disciples need them, but even the elders needed them. This was because while one could become an elder after opening 10 meridians, the limit was 12. Thus, an outstanding disciple like Li Changdan would only be able to obtain 1 meridian guiding fruit every 2 years. As for others, they would be able to get one every 4 to 5 years. Why had the sect master given it to a guy of unknown origin? What divine son? Li Changdan didn't believe it. Tongfeng, junior brother Ling has just arrived, and isn't familiar with this place. Show him around, he said. What? Xing Tongfeng almost jumped up. He still had to show that fellow around? Li Changdan smiled faintly. The town is quite fun. For example, Thousands Casino. Xing Tongfeng was stunned at first. Then, he came to a realization and said, I'll bring junior brother Ling to the casino now so he can have fun to his heart's content. To his heart's content naturally meant that Ling Han would lose everything, and even owe huge debts. At that time, he would be humiliated. In fact, he might even have to use the meridian guiding fruit to pay off some of his debt. Ling Han first put away the meridian guiding fruit, and placed it in a jade box. The latter could seal the essence of the precious fruit, and thus preserve it for a very, very long time. He kept the meridian guiding fruit with him. This thing was very precious. He was afraid that someone would steal it when he was out if he left it in the house. Huan Shui didn't have any battle prowess, so if an elite came, he could completely steal it without anyone noticing. Ling Han studied the 3 elements formation for a while, and decided to first search for terrain that met the requirements for formations and practice the creation of formation foundations. In any case, there was a limit to the amount of time he could cultivate every day, so it was useless to cultivate any longer than that. The ancient Dao sect was actually very large, occupying a large mountain. There were only ordinary wild beasts here, and no mutated demonic beasts. Even if there had been, they would all have been cleaned out by now. In addition, there was a town at the foot of the mountain, which was also under the protection of the ancient Dao sect. It was mainly occupied by ordinary people who served the ancient Dao sect. As Ling Han walked, he took a piece of wood, and carved in it with a knife, practicing the creation of formation foundations. He was completely clueless, and it did not affect him at all. After searching for half a day, he finally found a place that met the requirements. Right now, I'm only slightly stronger than an ordinary person. After walking for half a day, I'm actually already this tired, Ling Han lamented. His entire body was covered in sweat, and he had to hurry back to wash up. When Ling Han returned to his residence, he saw that there was actually a young man sitting in the room. Huan Shui had made him a cup of tea, and she was standing at the side, appearing somewhat respectful. Ling Han frowned. He was an extremely protective person. Huan Shui was his maid, so why should she be ordered around by others? Junior brother Ling! Jingtong Feng immediately put down his teacup and laughed loudly. My name is Jingtong Feng. I joined the Sect 7 years ago. I was busy practicing martial arts, and didn't have the time to visit junior brother. Today, I'm here to apologize. Ling Han chuckled in his heart. Did he really think that he was a young brat who had just been born? He smiled indifferently and said, Thank you, senior brother. Come. I'll bring you around. Although the heaven and earth have changed greatly, there are still many fun places. Jingtong Feng pulled Ling Han out the door, not allowing Ling Han to object at all. His power was too strong. Ling Han nodded at Huan Shui, indicating that there was no need for her to be nervous. Although Jingtong Feng was much stronger than Ling Han, he would not dare to make a move in the ancient Tao sect. They descended the mountain, and soon arrived in the town. Here people were coming and going, and it was very lively. However, the strange thing was that apart from the side that led to the mountain, there were tall black walls erected everywhere around the town, emitting a metallic luster under the moonlight. Although Lord Sect Master and other elites are holding down the fort, there will still occasionally be demonic beasts invading. Thus, this wall is used to defend against demonic beasts. Jingtong Feng explained. This isn't as simple as just a wall. It's connected to high-voltage electricity, and if a demonic beast below 6 meridians touches it, it will immediately turn into charcoal. Ling Han nodded. This was a little like the realm battlefield. Humans were at an absolute disadvantage, and had to worry about their lives at all times. Come. Let's have a good time today, Jingtong Feng said with a smile. However, when his smile disappeared, the corners of his mouth curled up with the hints of a sneer. Ling Han's horizons had really been broadened. Everything here used electricity. There were lights that could glow without needing to be lit and cars that could drive automatically without needing to exert strength. Everything was because of electricity. Under Jingtong Feng's lead, they arrived in front of a 5-story building. Colorful neon lights flashed at the entrance, and beauties in revealing clothes flirted with others, attracting passers-by to enter. Yo, isn't this young Master Jing? A beauty immediately walked over, her hips swaying, and placed her fair arm on Jingtong Feng's shoulder. You haven't been here for a long time. Jingtong Feng was clearly a regular customer, and did not show a trace of shyness or panic. Instead, he moved and took quite a bit of advantage of the woman. Only then did he point at Ling Han and say, Today, I'm here with junior brother Ling to have some fun. Yo, sisters, quickly come and greet young Master Ling, the beauty said to the other 3 women at the door. The 3 women immediately surrounded him, wanting to squeeze into Ling Han's embrace. Ling Han smiled faintly, and he gently pushed the 3 women outward with a shove of his hands. What a joke! How could he fall for such promiscuous women? He turned his head and asked, Senior brother Jing, what's so fun about this? What an unromantic fellow, Jingtong Feng said disdainfully in his heart, but he laughed out loud. Don't be anxious. I can guarantee that it will be fun inside. He brought Ling Han in, and the air of extravagance and wealth instantly assaulted their faces. The building was filled with gambling tables. There were gamblers with bloodshot eyes and flushed faces, as well as beautiful women in revealing clothes who were stirring up the emotions of the gamblers. Why did Jingtong Feng bring him to the casino? Ling Han immediately came to a realization. He was trying to use gambling to corrode him, and might even be trying to make him owe a huge debt. How did I offend him? Ling Han reflected inwardly. He had seized the position of future Tao child the moment he arrived, and had even been bestowed with a Meridian guiding fruit. This would definitely make people jealous. Therefore, there should be many people in the ancient Tao sect who hated him, and were waiting to see him make a fool of himself. Alright, let's play then. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.